there. Yeah,
I'm gonna. Do you want me to record on my end too, and then I can send you a high def audio file?
yeah,
You think
yeah.
that'd be helpful? Okay, I'm gonna start recording now, and then you can just cut. You can just start using it.
Okay.
Um, if you see fit. The way that I sometimes do interviews is I'll have the other person record. Although I found a new way to do this. It's through a company called Squadcast, but I'll have them record and then they'll send me the audio file and then we splice it. And it sounds like we're sitting next to each other. So
Oh, cool. That's
yeah, yeah. Since we can't be in Austin right now, I can't be in Austin right now.
my star behind me is, it looks like I have horns.
Yeah, you've got like little bunny ears.
Yeah,
Right.
horns. But yeah, so yeah, we have rescheduled this a million times. And yes, I am dealing with and going through a lot, but I am still very motivated and passionate about, and even more so now,
Yeah. Right.
getting more information out there to women for their health, and bringing awareness to that. And my mom has inspired me for that very reason. And just
Mm,
being in the hospitals and with the doctors, it's bringing more awareness to me again, like reminders of just how much is not being shared
mm,
between doctor patient.
mm,
So
mm-hmm,
it
mm-hmm.
just feels like such a privilege to talk to you, because you are a doctor and a specialist who does work with women directly, who provides sort of that open channel of communication, opportunity, and on a very, we talked about the word holistic a little bit, but holistic level. And
Sure.
I don't, when I gave women the floor, and a lot of my clients and members and students the floor to, here's a chance to ask some questions. I shared some of them with you. A lot of them were, yeah, I don't know whether to ask my doctor about this, pap smears,
Yeah.
mammograms, thermography, or the vaccines and things like that, where it does seem like these would be questions you could or should ask your doctor, and would be able to get, answers from your OBGYN
Right.
about these. But there's, most of the feedback is that they already have sort of a known or a perceived known response they'll get from their OBGYN,
Yeah.
that it's very mainstream. There's not really anything outside of it. So what is really kind of your experience with that?
Well, first off, it's nice to see you in person, and thanks for having me on. I'm glad that we've gotten to sort of appreciate one another's work because I, like you, I'm sort of on this journey now, right? Having trained within the medical system, and I'm talking about the allopathic medical system as a very specific way of approaching problems.
Can you define that real quick? Because that's
So
a lot of people ask me about that, allopathic. So when you say allopathic, can you
yeah,
define that for us?
yeah, totally. So allopathic refers to what most people in the United States consider when they, at their regular doctor's office, right? So there's a process by which you get selected to enter into a medical program for 4 years at least, and then you have to go and specialize. That's called residency, and then you can do fellowship after that, which is 1 to 3 years more, right? So as an OBGYN, you do 10 to 15 years of training,
Well,
and you come out with a toolkit, but that toolkit really is applied in a very specific fashion. It's, let me figure out what problems are going on with the patient. Let's try to package that into a specific diagnosis, and then which of the tools here can I bring out to pound away at that problem in order to try to fix it.
mhm.
And the problem in the OBGYN world, that the way that I have experienced it, is that the vast majority of those problems that we package up are fixed, or we try to fix them with surgery or medication, right? Most oftenly birth control pills.
Mm.
And so that's a problem, right? Because it's really palliating maybe some issues. And your listeners asked questions about endometriosis or whatever, abdominal pain, something as simple as abdominal pain, or at heavy periods or whatever, right? Like these are all things that we will then put a band-aid on it. We'll tack like a piece of gum in the wall of the Hoover Dam, right? Without realizing, wait, why is there even a crack here? Like what is going on here that's causing these abnormal cycles or whatever? And what I found, in my own sort of life experience was like, I don't want somebody just like, you know, put newspaper over the pee spot on the carpet. Like let's figure out what's going on here. Let's figure out why the dog is peeing on the carpet, It's a strange metaphor I just came up with in my head. You're welcome. Um,
My dog to the vet at 4 o'clock today for that reason. That's that you
like
brought that up.
there you go. I must have been channeling you last night. Yeah, that's why I wasn't able to
You
sleep.
were.
Like her dog has a UTI or something.
What's going on? This is
What's going on with this
behavioral
leakage?
thing. He's also getting in
Yeah.
his trash a lot, so I think he's
Yeah.
the cat. But
Yeah, well, I mean, so so that's a perfect illustration for anybody who doesn't really appreciate just what we're trying to do here in this allopathic approach is we're just trying to get you by.
mhm.
And what you and I do with our clients and what I've had to really struggle with as a physician is to take a step out of that paradigm and to really look at why are you having these abnormal periods? Why are you having horrible, debilitating pain? Once a month. Like, why is that all happening? And that's where the journey kind of begins as an allopathic physician, because while I have all these tools that are going to help you feel better in the meantime, I don't really know why how you got here. And so, there's this buzzword functional medicine, right? A lot of functional medicine doctors come from the naturopathic or the allopathic or the osteopathic worlds. And by the way, osteopaths do something very, very different in like, Australia, New Zealand, Europe. They actually do some manipulations. It's almost like a combination of allopathic medicine, which is the surgery and medication world, and chiropractics and manipulation of how signals are kind of flowing to and from the brain, right, to the periphery. But in the United States, osteopathic doctors don't really practice the manipulation techniques
Mm.
of trying to get the spine working in the proper order, right? It was sort of wiped out by the sort of acceptance of allopathic medicine as the provider of all things medicine, in the United States in particular. But yeah, the functional medicine approach is really where I think most of us who are open-minded are starting to get to, because we're just tired of not fixing problems. Like I didn't go to school for 10 to 15 years in order to say, well, Sarah, I know your bladder hurts, but like that's yeah, that stinks. Why don't you take this preparation, and maybe that'll just make you feel a little bit better. I mean, that will help you in the short run, but you want to know what's going on. You want to really know what's happening. So that's, hopefully that answers the question about the allopathic approach. It does have really good uses, right? If you get in a massive car accident, you don't want to run to your naturopath. You want to run to the emergency room where an allopathic physician is going to fix you and prevent you from dying.
Yeah.
Perhaps some other things like, you get stabbed in the chest with a sword. That would be a good reason. You break a leg, you want to have that set and maybe fixated by an orthopedic surgeon. And really, in my world, there are
Grateful.
occasions. What's up?
I was very grateful for it when I had a MRSA infection.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's good reasons to not throw the entire germ theory out the window. Like, there's a nasty blood infection. You better give me some antibiotics. I want that.
Yeah.
Um, but on the other hand, if we look at the birth world,
Mm.
should we be doing C-sections 40 to 50% of the time? I mean, how dystopic does our society seem when we're cutting into a womb, removing a baby and then suturing them up and not even batting an eye at it? Like that should be a sign that something's wrong here, So my C-section rate has always remained very, very low. And it's not just that I have a magical thinking that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But when you get out of the way of physiology and you actually try to optimize the physiology of pregnancy, stuff tends to actually go well in birth, and there are certain situations in which a C-section should be needed, but we're talking probably less than 5%. Yet again, we go to our toolkit and we're like, well, gosh, the baby's not coming out through the vagina. I got these tools here. Let's get it out another way. Instead of really asking, okay, doc, in your practice, half of the patients are requiring C-sections. Let's take a pause and figure out why might that be? Are you only operating on breech pregnancies? Okay, then maybe given your hospital requirements or whatever, maybe that's necessary. But it's probably not. It's probably not the case.
Yeah.
In fact, you're probably just doing too many surgeries. So, does that make
I
sense?
had, yes, I had 3 C-sections. I tried VBAC on my second. I tried it very, very hard. I tried to do it, but I was told, after I labored a while, that the same thing was happening that as my first, that I
Mhm.
wouldn't dilate past 6.
Right.
And we didn't want to happen with my second, what happened with the first, which, she just kept trying. I was very, very stubborn. And I knew what I was getting into at a teaching hospital in Georgetown, DC. They were going to try everything they could, right? So I was very stubborn and kept going, kept going. That was very, very painful labor over almost 40 hours. And finally, because she was really pushing down, the contractions were very strong for a very long time. She ended up having the cord wrapped around her neck twice. And so then, so I didn't want that to happen the second time around. So the third time I really did try again and
Mhm.
again, but they had told me the second time when she looked at me, I had a great doctor, that I had a lot of scarring on my
Mm.
cervix.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I began to research into that LEAP procedures. Are you
Mhm.
familiar with that? That
Yeah.
repeat LEAP procedures can create a lot of scarring on the cervix.
Mhm.
So with my third, I was a bit, you know, uh, I guess not very confident to have a vaginal delivery, even though, we were thinking, let's try to, with oils, massage, and all of that, and that didn't work out. So what, speaking of rates of C-section, the rates of LEAP procedures, how necessary are these?
Well, you're kind of asking you're asking like the hard questions really, because cervical cancer is
Sorry.
a really tricky one. No, it's okay. It's okay. The things to remember about cervical cancer is that this is a cancer that grows very, very, very slowly. Which is why screening, generally starts around age 20, 21, and you can do a pap smear every 3 years. And then, when you roughly reach the age of 30, it can be sort of changed to about 5 years, but then you're also checking for HPV. And there's this virus, the HPV virus. This is a bit controversial in my world right now. Is this virus really causing cervical cancer? Is it more of an environmental um, process that's kind of allowing this this sort of underlying chemical process and the changing of the architecture of the cells around the cervix
Mhm.
to to grow, unchecked, right? So anyways, that's the screening process. And once something is found to be like on a pap smear, for example, a pap smear is really when you take a brush, you sweep it around the transformation zone. It's the
Mhm.
without getting too detailed here, around the, just imagine like the donut of the cervix. If you haven't looked at a cervix, everybody go on Google and look at what your cervix looks like. It's a little round donut. You sweep a cyto brush, and then a pathologist will take the cells and kind of distill them onto a microscope slide, and then look to see what do the cells look like. And cancer cells tend to look like they look different from regular, quote, healthy cells. And so as the sort of proportion of those nasty looking cells, and the nastier they look, the more likely you would conceive that, oh man, maybe in the next coming years this might actually turn into a cancer. And cervical cancer is a nasty thing.
Mhm.
Young people dying very, very horribly. I mean, I'm a hospice doctor as well. I didn't really say that earlier, but um, I have a 42-year-old patient who is probably going to die in the next couple days, and she is miserable because her kidneys don't work. The ureters have clamped off, and of course, like there's the sort of intimacy factor. Like you have this cancer down here in these parts, and we've removed a lot of that tissue, and there's bleeding, and I mean, there's odor, it's just a really, really hard thing to live with. So it is important that we know about this. And the LEAP procedure is the cervical knife cone procedure. It's a conization. Basically, you take a scalpel and you cut a chunk of the cervix out. Those procedures will remove that part of the cervix that is generating these funky cells, right? And it can be curative. It can actually be very, very preventive. Now, whether or not they need to be done when they're being done is something we probably won't know for a very long time until we have a bit of a paradigm shift around cervical cancer. But for now, early screening, frequent screening is probably your best bet. And if those precancerous cells start to emerge, what the first question I would ask before we even go to that excision procedure, especially if you're a young person, usually we're not doing excision procedures
Mhm.
unless we're really convinced this is going to be cancer, because young people tend to have strong immune systems. They
Mhm.
tend to clear this HPV virus if that's if that's the there's a preponderance for having that HPV test positive for people that actually develop cervical cancer, um, especially with some of the higher risk strains like HPV 16 and 18. Um, if you were to be found to have an abnormal pap test, the first thing that you should be doing, and this is just in line with your and my practice, is it's not easy, but you have to take a step back and consider, how am I living my life? Right? Am I in a state of stress at all times? Am I not sleeping? Am I not putting good, organic, biodynamically raised food or meat into my body? Am I not eating meat at all? Maybe I need to be eating meat and I've been vegetarian for all this time, or I've been vegan. You may need to be changing things up, and that might not be what you want to hear. And
Mhm.
that's why people who work with me on a private level, um, they are really motivated. They're really motivated to make these changes. But with those changes, stopping smoking, stopping drinking, those types of things, your immune system perks up and you can clear all of these quote precancerous cells
Yeah.
really easily. I mean, everybody has cancer in their body. That's what people don't understand. There's cancerous cells that are trying to break free and run unchecked, right? Because the body wants to survive. All your tissues are trying to survive and they're trying to balance each other out. Well, everybody has cancer cells. You have natural killer cells within your immune system that clear them out. And so if you don't have a functioning immune system, you have a higher risk of cancer. So anyways, that's a long answer to your question, but I don't have any short answers. I mean, this is one of those things that grows over many, many years. Cervical cancer does. And if you can change your lifestyle, you can probably eliminate your chances of getting this nasty disease.
Okay. Well, yeah, that pretty much is aligned with when I was getting those LEAP procedures. It was before I was
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed with celiac disease, and
Mm-hmm.
my immune system was a mess. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Very
Right.
stressful time in my life, and I was very, very sick, and no one was able to really diagnose why I was sick. And I was just doctor to doctor and being
Yeah.
just shuffled around everywhere. But
Yeah.
every time I went to and I was on birth control. So every time I refilled it was like every year they had to reevaluate. You got to do your pap smear. Oh, there's abnormal cells. You have to come back for the leap.
Yeah.
And
That's interesting. Wow. I wonder if anybody's actually done some sort of qualitative research to see over time people who develop, you know, um, cervical cancers or whatever, right? If they have some sort of dysregulation of their immune system, which is popping up in other ways. The problem with that is that a lot of people live with digestive issues and don't even realize that they're out of whack, and I know you know that as well as I do.
yeah.
So they may not even have reported it, but you being so in tune with your body, you're like the perfect candidate to work with me because you actually are like thoughtful about what is going on here. I don't feel like I should be bloating like this and all that stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll talk about endometriosis,
Waking
but
up in the middle of the night farting. Is that normal? The
yeah.
farting to wake me up? I thought it was nightmares, but yeah, it got pretty bad. But there are people that are just that they adapt
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
much over time to all these symptoms that they're not aware there are symptoms
Oh yeah.
until they begin to heal. And then they experience a symptom and they're like, I never reacted to wine this way. I never
Yeah.
reacted to this food this way. That food
Sure.
never used to bother me. It's like,
Sure.
news for
Sure.
you. Yes, it did.
Right.
It
Right.
actually did.
Well, and a lot of those issues like celiac and whatnot. I have a friend who was just diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. Like, this is not something that you just woke up with one day and you're like, oh, bloody horrible diarrhea. Like, this did not just happen. This
It,
is something that developed maybe over a decade, and it's going to take a decade to fix.
it
But
did.
it's possible to do it. So
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. It took me at least 8 years, if not more.
wow, 8 years. That's
Yeah,
dedication. It really is. Wow.
it did.
Wow.
Well, and there's many setbacks. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you
It's
get
a roller
frustrated,
coaster.
and you get impatient, and upset with yourself. And so, uh, you know, I wanted to give up. And I wanted to go into the pantry with the thing of Betty Crocker. and hide and just be like, "Oh, I want my childhood."
Yeah, yeah. Give me my cookie dough.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, well, I had there were, I did send you some questions because
Yeah.
some really good ones. Bioidentical hormones, mammograms versus thermography. How do I say that? Thermography. I've always been curious about that. And yeah, perimenopause, menopause, interventions with birth in the hospital, endometriosis. Yeah. What and yeah, this one about the vaccine, COVID vaccine, and we dare talk about that. And
We
what
dare. Yeah.
what is your soul calling you to go into here?
Why don't we talk a little bit about the COVID thing? Just because it's kind of fresh
Great.
on my mind.
Yes.
I know that it sucks. I know everybody's tired of talking about it, but I'm an OBGYN and most of the people that reach out to me are they're midwives, doulas, birth educators, they're moms,
Hmm.
and they're really thoughtful about this. And I'm getting inundated with information, as I'm sure you are as well. It's just there's so much stuff out there, and I've read as much as I can find. I've read books. I even picked up an old immunology textbook for the first time and dusted it off. Like, what the hell is going on with our immune system here? What are they doing to us with these vaccines? And not that you asked, but I did. My family decided not to get the vaccine because it's an unproven technology. It's a brand new technology. And early Pfizer data, there was a study that actually it came out of Japan first. I found it translated into English. It's very hard to read because it's a translation, and the formatting is all weird. And then there was also an Oxford study that came out as well that said, hey, the early data here with these vaccines is showing a number of things. It's showing that there's a concentration of some part of this injection in bone marrow and ovaries, and we don't really understand why that would be. It's the lipoprotein part of this. But what are the long term consequences of displacing healthy bone marrow and ovarian tissue with this stuff? Like, why is this stuff concentrating there? And should we be asking questions about it?
Hmm.
And my thought is that I don't have the answer. I really don't know. It may have no implication. It may have short or long term serious consequences, though. And never once before in all of my medical training have I heard of something being rolled out under an emergency authorization and being given to everybody over the age of 11, especially young women who are trying to get pregnant and who are pregnant. So ACOG came out right away and said, we think this is safe for pregnant women. Based on what? Based on what information?
Yeah, and I even have Pfizer's and AstraZeneca, all
Hmm.
the information they had to submit to the FDA on
Yeah.
all, this is all,
Right.
the data
Right.
that they collected over
Right.
the 45 days that they, researched it.
45 days. Wow.
Um, all their benefit versus risk and
Mhm.
unknown benefits and gaps, data gaps.
Right.
And they even say it is not possible to assess the sustained efficacy over a period
That's right.
longer than 2 months,
Right.
and that they have no known data on safety or efficacy in immunosuppressed those who are over the age of 60 or under the age of 18, pregnant, lactating.
Jeez, oh man.
So that's where I mean, they
Right.
say
Right.
it,
Right. Right.
but yet the
Right.
CDC and everybody says that it is safe,
Right.
but they say they don't have that information. And so that's where it's just,
So the manufacturer themselves haven't really come out to say, "Hey, we think this is really safe." They're just doing their best to meet this emergency authorization, this demand that the public is demanding a vaccine because, this became a big political thing, and then suddenly we're rolling out this technology that is it's not a conventional vaccine. People I don't even think people really understand that. What a
and that it
vaccine is
doesn't
known.
actually qualify as a
Well,
vaccine.
I wouldn't call it a vaccine because a conventional vaccine is made up of parts of a viral envelope, right? And whether it's a virus or what's now this reemergence of interest in what's called an exosome, it's the same thing. It's a coating of sugar and protein, and we take parts of that and we think it's specific to this virus that's causing COVID-19, and then we we would make a vaccine that has that stuff. We would inject it into the arm, and then the body's immune system would see it, make antibodies to those parts, and then presumably you'd be protected, right? Some vaccines work better than others. It's not what we're not going to talk about vaccines today. The mRNA thing about this C19 injection is a sequence. It's a nucleic acid sequence, right? That is presumably, it corresponds with a protein within this viral envelope that is injected into the body. The body takes it up, and then our own cells build proteins that are then to elicit an immune response, which to me sounds like, by definition, an autoimmune response, because
Yeah,
your body is producing the protein.
right.
That's where I'm at, and that sounds scary. That sounds to me like, whoa, we're this is a new thing, and how on earth are we supposed to expect that this is a safe thing just to like willy-nilly recommend to all pregnant
Really
women?
messing with nature there.
It is, yeah,
Well,
and the
viruses
burden of
are very much like humans, kind of, right? I mean, they're the envelope, like you said, like
mm,
that's how they survive, is sensory. And they're using sensory within that envelope to feel out and identify
mm,
what is the right place to invade and survive and thrive, right? And they're using that. And so we're trying to copy this thing and put it in our bodies
right,
and
right.
trick ourselves into thinking that it's in us and becoming a part of us. So, like, essentially making parts of our bodies mimic, and it's almost like there's
Like
a
genetic
zombie
engineering, it
apocalypse
sounds
out
like.
there. So let's pretend we're all zombies so the zombies don't come get us,
That's interesting. I hadn't
right?
really
So
thought about
then,
that. Yeah.
but are we, in a sense, then kind of becoming zombies in the long term? We don't know. We don't know if then our body's actually going to become the zombie. Like, I
Right.
don't know.
Right. Well, the only that's an interesting metaphor. The only language I would change there is that, to even take a step back further, viruses are not living things. These are snippets of nucleic acid referring to either RNA or DNA. In this case, it's RNA for any coronavirus, which is, by the way, the the virus that causes the common cold. There's a spackling of them out there. This just happens to be one particular strain we think we've identified. So I'm writing an essay on this, by the way, and it's ready for publication. I just haven't like pulled the trigger yet because I need to make sure that I have it just right. I'm kind of a perfectionist like that. But
Me too.
the
I'd like to read it.
oh, good, yeah, I'll send it to you for sure. But the a virus is not a living thing, and we, for hundreds of years now, have thought about human beings as being sort of the center of the biosphere, right? Everything circulates around us for our exploitation, for our purpose, to make us better and heal, blah blah blah. So if we were to consider that viruses outnumber bacteria probably 10 to 1, probably even 1,000 to 1, because we don't really know what a virus is, right? We see it as this thing that seems to be communicating through this strand of nucleic acid, but it's not even a living thing. It's not seeking you out, Sarah, in order to harness your life stores in order to make itself stronger and proliferate, because that sounds like it has some intention. This is literally a speck, a snippet of nucleic acid wrapped in protein floating around. And there's billions of them right in the room with you right now. So how are we supposed to protect ourselves from this thing? Because this thing is not out to get us. This thing has to be a part of the biosphere. It has to be a part of us because we are carrying these snippets all over.
Mm,
And without getting too much into the coronavirus thing, because you did ask about the vaccine, just remember, like, we haven't even isolated a virus. This virus, this C19, we haven't, SARS-CoV-2, we haven't purified and isolated a virus. So if we can't do that, we can't sequence it. If we can't sequence it, we can't create a reliable PCR test. And if we can't sequence it, we can't create a vaccine that it contains mRNA that presumably is a part of the viral, capsid. So there's a lot of missing pieces in the story of what happened here, and it all was rolled out very, very quickly under the guise of this emergency measure that was needed. And I will admit that there were some very, very sick people at the very, very beginning of this. It was very frightening.
mm,
I think we all saw like there is a lot of people going to the hospital there. I have a friend who's a pulmonologist. He's like, dude, people are dying left and right on me. I don't know what is happening out there. But I think given we haven't really identified a causative factor here, we have to, I'm forced to take a step back and again think about what environmental factors have really been contributing to people's health. And it goes into our training as healthcare professionals. It goes back to that function. Like, what is causing this? Like, none of the pieces here seem to make sense to me. And I've been getting pushback this whole time. But is it just that like really sick people are just being overwhelmed by something in the environment, whether it's a virus, whether it's this new 5G thing, whether it's their crappy diet that they've been, relying on for 20 years. And instead of manifesting ulcerative colitis, they've manifested this nasty pulmonitis.
Mhm.
The only thing that seems to help is steroids. And if steroid is working, it's not an infection, it's inflammation. So all of this is to say that we're injecting people with this device that even the manufacturers have said, whoa, hey, we're seeing some weird stuff happen here. Maybe we should pull back. And all of the colleges, a lot of physicians and nurses and nurse practitioners are all saying, yeah, do it. They're posting the picture of the shot, getting the jab on their Instagram. And they're saying like we're heroes. Like, we're not heroes, guys, if we're not asking questions. And that is really, really important to me.
Yeah, yeah. But so you were saying about the liposome, that this study that you found about, it was kind of difficult to read because you had to translate it. And
Yeah. Well, I didn't
that was
translate
one
it.
of those.
Somebody else did it.
Well, it was one of your initial things where you were like, we don't know the long-term things here, but something you said about it getting into the bone marrow and the ovaries, do you think, and again, this is all theory, we don't know, because again, a lot of information is being suppressed and censored. And
Yeah, that's
a
right.
lot of scientists, a lot of physicians, a lot of people are there's a lot of pushback to this, but I am also noticing a lot of more information is being revealed. So is there something that could explain why we're hearing and seeing a lot of women and girls that are experiencing issues like reproductive issues,
Yeah.
issues
Yeah.
with periods, and even girls and women who didn't get the shot,
Mhm.
who are reporting some issues
Right.
around their period, like changes in their period. What would that be? Because I'm hearing a lot of stuff about shedding, but I really
Mhm.
don't want to get so down that rabbit hole because I feel like if I do, and I'm a researcher, and I feel if I do that, I'll never, I'm like Alice in Wonderland. I just go down and I'll never come up for air. And yeah, like I just,
Right. Yeah. So what you're trying to promote is the evidence-based medicine approach. And I think that unfortunately there are some big problems with that right now. In many ways, the um the medical research establishment has sort of let us down, right, for years. And there's some really good researchers out there. There's some very honest epidemiologists. John Ioannidis is one of my heroes. And I will get to your question, by the way. But the reason it's so hard to figure out what's going on is that even early on in this pandemic, so John Ioannidis years ago had even wrote like, hey, around 50% of stuff that's published, if not more, is kind of crap because people are just manipulating the results in order to find something that is interesting, right? And a lot of people's jobs are on the line. Like, you work at UCLA, you got to publish this thing and you have to make a wave. That's how you show how respectable you are as a
yeah.
representative of UCLA. For example, I'm not picking on UCLA, but um, I didn't mean to pick on UCLA. I guess I did inadvertently.
Well, I understand the concept and the example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
So there's pressure to publish and to not really even study a lot of things that we think might be helpful, like natural compounds. Patent law prevents us from making money off of patenting stuff that's in the body and in nature, right? Which is good. We don't want to be patenting pure clean drinking water or whatever. So with the cost of research, people are pressured to do things in order to make a wave within the research community because that's where the money is. So so then fast forward to this, and that was years ago that Ioannidis published that piece, but he's super respected. He's an epidemiologist at Stanford. Fast forward to early on in the pandemic, and the Lancet, it's arguably the most prestigious medical journal on the planet. They published a study that claimed that hydroxychloroquine is I think it's an anti-malarial is what it was originally designed as, but there was this medication that was proposed to be able to help support people through COVID-19 and get them back on their feet, right? Well, right away, this study came out in the Lancet, this huge journal. It's so hard to get something
Mhm.
published, peer reviewed, and
Yeah.
published in the Lancet. It looked at like 90,000 people in over 600 countries on every continent apart from maybe Antarctica.
Yeah.
And it said, hey, this medicine doesn't work. And
Yeah.
it just showed up in the journal in like May of 2020. Like, who on earth can look at that and say, like, holy smokes, they got 90,000 people enrolled in a study and they did this
A
data.
couple
They got
months.
this data out there. How is that possible? So of course, a month later, they retracted it because they couldn't back up where the information was coming from. But the reason I bring this example up is that the Lancet, this massive journal, published this thing, and it was like, this is huge, and everybody was doubting it, and then they just took it out like, oh, I'm sorry about that.
Mhm.
I mean if that can happen in the Lancet with
Very
such a
quiet.
massively obviously fraudulent data set, then what else are we being,
Yeah.
is being compromised here? So I really struggle with that. And so the reason that we don't have a lot of information about what's going on here is that I'm afraid that people are coming with these anecdotal this stuff about bleeding. Even a close family member of mine had a Mirena IUD in place, which, after 2 years, most people, or over 50% of people, are will tell you that they don't have any periods at all. So my sister, I just outed her, but I don't think she would mind. She said, I'm bleeding now. Like, I've never had periods at all, and I'm spotting now, and it's like, what is going on here? So that is not somebody who's trying to get followers on Twitter or whatever. She's just like, hey, you're a GYN. Like, what's going on here?
Mm.
And those stories continued to pop up and pop up and pop up. And unfortunately, we've gone so far down. We've become so attached to this narrative that this thing has to be stopped. This invader, this this foreign invader virus, and it's killing so many people, and this and that we've stopped asking questions. And
Yeah.
when enough people present, hey, there's some weird stuff going on here, that would be a cause for some remediation by the producer of any technology, including an injectable, you know,
Yeah.
vaccine. So why aren't people asking that question? I don't know, but there is something to it, and it all seems to tie into coagulopathy. We've got first trimester miscarriage, which could be subchorionic bleeding, etc. We've got gingival bleeding. We've got epistaxis, nosebleeds. We've got GI bleeding, and we've got abnormal menstrual bleeding. Women are lucky in some regard to be able to bleed once a month because it really tells you a lot about what's happening in the body. It's a vital sign,
Mhm.
as far as I'm concerned. In fact, that's the title of a really good book, Fifth Vital Sign, for anybody that wants to understand their periods a little bit better.
Yeah.
Lisa Hendricks and Jack. It's a great book. She's been on my podcast, and she does a really nice job of laying this out. Like if you aren't bleeding at normal cycles, right, in a predictable, regular way, I'm using air quotes on my end, then something might be gone. It might be off. Like, let's send you to a functional OBGYN. Let's try to figure it out. And that's probably the vast majority of people that I am talking to right now is they're like, I wasn't having menstrual problems, and now I'm like bleeding twice a month, and what the hell's going on here? So um, I think that there could be some long term implications here. I don't necessarily think that we can say it's the vaccine. I think that would be unscientific. It did seem to appear when this vaccine started rolling out, but again, what if there is some environmental factor that suddenly is just overwhelming, the population? People have been talking about like electromagnetic frequencies and 5G, and I initially wasn't convinced, but like, man, if you look at the plot of how this stuff happened,
Mhm.
um, it does seem like there's some other environmental factor. The second shoe has dropped for how we've been living our lives, eating McDonald's, and perhaps there's a combination of all these factors. That's most likely the scenario. But there's something going on, Sarah, and I'm not exactly sure what it is.
Yeah, interesting. Because yeah, a lot of reports of things, and I try not to. I've been invited to Facebook groups and
Yeah,
Instagram accounts that are just dedicated to anecdotal accounts of women's responses, reactions to things
yeah,
like this. But
yeah.
I feel like, well, if this is inviting the public to report things, how do we know if
Mm-hmm.
how real all of this is? If
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you've got people who are very motivated to crash that system? How do we know they're not creating fake accounts or making up
Yeah.
stories
Yep.
versus the
Right.
stories that are real? So I'm really leaning on
Hmm.
my community, my
Hmm.
friends, my family, people I know, and there are a lot of accounts on
Yeah. Yeah.
that end. So I'm okay. Well, this is interesting, and I try to think about it in terms of what I know of what is in this cocktail or these cocktails, and I don't, and I don't know enough about it to
Right.
explain that, and I
Right.
don't know anything about this. Not much in terms of like the shedding because it's not a virus, right? It's not shedding onto us.
Right. Right. Right.
So how would it affect those who aren't getting it in terms of causing abnormal stuff? And so
Yeah.
then you start getting into a lot of conspiracy theories of other things. So then, what my position personally, you didn't ask, but I'm going to share it,
Please.
is not elevate my frequencies and vibrations into this is going to affect me. This is going to hurt me. I guess,
Bingo.
I'm going to be another one of those stories.
Bingo.
I just decide not to
That's so wise.
I just decide not to elevate into that frequency. I
Yeah.
just keep my frequency with, I am living, in alignment to my values and in a healthy way and loving myself, loving my environment, loving my family, my children, and my clients and the world.
Right.
And through me loving myself and sharing that love, um,
Hmm.
it will be reflected in my body and in my health. Um,
That's beautiful.
so I just keep my vibration there. And so far, I haven't noticed anything personally, me, in
Yeah.
that sense. I noticed, and I am 41. I have noticed like the first day of my menstrual cycle is a little heavier. It's been getting heavier though. It's like super tampons. Eh, I more or less need to just roll up a futon mattress for that first day. And then after that, I'm good.
That
Just,
really weighs down your yoga pants, I'm sure. That doesn't, it's not a
right.
good look, but hey,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
futon mattress.
Of course, I'm exaggerating, but they don't have that size tampon. They don't have futon mattress, but
Yeah.
I've looked. They don't have
Sure, it's not on the bottom shelf behind like somewhere, somewhere down there, behind the bath bombs or something. Yeah.
it. Right, right. I'm just exaggerating, of course, because I feel
Yeah.
like the rest of the like 3 or so days are just so
Sure.
light,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
light.
It's like, let's just put up with the one day. Right.
Yeah, that one day I'm like, okay, I just sat down.
Yeah.
So inconvenient. So inconvenient
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have such a beautiful sign of my health. So
Well,
inconvenienced.
yeah. Yeah.
That's that's really how it boils down to.
I really want to touch on that fear thing that you mentioned. Like, and you didn't say the word fear, probably
On
intentionally,
purpose.
but I have a really good friend who's a midwife, and she's very, very counterculture. Let's just say, I mean, she is an unlicensed midwife who does really, really great work. And she she and I
Gratitude
had
for
a what's that?
so much gratitude for her.
Oh, she's amazing. She's one of my favorite people. Her name's Marion Green. She doesn't care if I use her name. She's awesome. She and I have talked about this at length, and she's like, I've just the whole vaccine, like when we started finding that people, it seemed in proximity to people who got the vaccine, were having some issues. It draws the question, like, should I be screening people's vaccination status and asking them to not come around if they got it, right? So we actually went down that path in our conversation, and we both decided, well, to hell with it. Like, I'm not going to live in a state of fear about COVID-19. And I'm not going to live in a state of fear about people who got the vaccine who may or may not be shedding or whatever else, because that doesn't help us. Like, it probably the biggest, the most confounding factor for the death rates this past year has been how many people through isolation and living in a state of fear have seen nasty health consequences as a result. I mean, at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control. And if you're afraid of viruses, number one, you're screwed because there's viruses everywhere. And number two, if you're afraid of people who now have been vaccinated against a virus, whether or not you're on the narrative or the counter narrative side, you're screwed, because you're just putting yourself in a state of fear. So all that you and I can do, Sarah, and all of our clients and our friends and family can do is just to sit with this and do our work and like tend our garden, Um, there's really, really something to that. And then the other point I wanted to mention was, since we are talking about periods, you mentioned just like the beautiful nature, and I did comment on this before, of like, you have this other vital sign, like my menstrual periods. And when we start to see irregularities, I think it is important for everybody to ask those questions. I
Mhm.
think that I think that where the failing of science is not that the medical and the scientific communities are letting us down. That is a consequence of a lack of critical thinking on the part of all of us,
Yeah.
right? To actually sit back and say, what am I actually seeing happen in front of my eyes? What are my friends telling me? What is this person who I live with experiencing? How am I feeling? And if the way that your five senses, and perhaps maybe some other senses you've picked up through spiritual practice, if your intuition is telling you something isn't right here, it demands investigation. And when we say, hey, it's not worthy of investigation because we already have the story figured out, you've already lost track of the scent,
Hmm.
because none of us have the answer. I mean, I've been to school my entire life. I am a pretty smart guy, and I will be the first to admit I really don't know. But what probably isn't going to help you is to walk around in fear, continuing to use divisive language, pushing people with masks out of your way. Like, this is I don't like the mask thing. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And if you want to wear a mask in my house, I'm probably not going to invite you over again. But if you just had a new baby and you want me to wear a mask because you're worried about your baby, like, I'm happy to do that because I love babies. Like, we just can't be fighting everything, every inch that we take, in our lives.
Yeah.
And then furthermore, if you aren't eating well, if you're not putting the right food into your body and exercising sometimes and getting sleep and having sex and intentionally loving your partner, then the rest of this stuff doesn't matter, because your garden is unhealthy. You're on an unstable platform. And it doesn't matter if it's a vaccine, if it's this virus, if it's some sort of space creature that's coming down. You're not in a good position to be able to survive virtually any stress. You're a stack of cards. You're a house of cards that's ready to collapse.
Right.
So those are the things that we can control. And we know that eating good food, quality food, tending to the soil, the health of your soil, and figuratively and literally, and drinking clean water, like all these things that you and I always talk about, like, we know that this is what's actually, the right thing to do. And the one thing I am so tired of is people who are wearing masks and they're getting this injection, and they're criticizing me for my stance as a medical practitioner and telling me that I'm a buffoon, when they finally got off their couch for the first time to go and get the vaccine in 15 years. Like, if you haven't been caring for your garden, then don't come to me and talk to me about optimal health. Like, it's
Right.
just not, it's going to fall short. You haven't been doing the work.
Right.
So anyways, that was my diatribe. Thanks for listening, everybody.
A bunch of claps in the lap. I don't have sound effects, but I'm sure if
We need like a laugh
I
track,
could
or
hear,
not, not a laugh track,
hear
a clap
everybody in
track.
the background. That's, yeah. No, but it's true. It's absolutely true. I think if you had a live audience right now, they'd be clapping right now. I heard it. I heard it.
I heard it somewhere. Yeah. In the ether. Yeah.
I did. All the spirit guides were like, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Like,
I think, yeah. So the takeaway with that, what do we do about the vaccine, and girls, young women, and women who are getting it? Yeah, just don't be afraid. Don't worry. Don't worry. Be happy. That's the takeaway.
yeah.
And
Right.
I agree
Right.
with that. I am aligned with that message when it comes to it. And I think, because what can you do? You
Right.
can't, just as much as like we don't like the mask thing and the fear stuff and isolation, you also, if you want to go out into the world, you can't ask, just as much as someone, I personally feel it's wrong for people to ask, have you been vaccinated? It's wrong for you to do the same,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then go, well, then I can't be around you because
Right.
I'm
Right.
afraid that
Right.
you being vaccinated is going to affect me. So I think, becoming the very thing that you're worried about.
Right.
So that's the mirror.
Right.
That's
Just
the
for it just
shadow.
divides us further. Yeah.
Right.
It's just not. Yeah. Exactly right.
Becoming the living shadow is
Right.
literally just inviting the problem that
That's
you are
exactly
trying
right.
to avoid. So really just rising above, not worrying about it, living in your highest vibration and staying true and aligned to your values and living a healthy, like you said, take care of your soil, take care, eat healthy food, clean water, be happy. Like,
Right. I mean, that is such an
it's more than
underappreciated. Yeah. 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 I mean, and that really like surprise, that's actually my treatment plan for literally everything.
that.
This
I think
is
it's great.
this is pretty basic stuff, but
Yeah.
it's so far removed from the silver bullet promises of the therapeutics of allopathic medicine,
Yeah.
which is, how I was trained. And so perhaps we have a paradigm shift ensuing. Maybe that was a silver lining of 2020 is that people are realizing, hey, we actually need to clean the tank as opposed to just treating the fish, the sick fish inside the dirty tank.
Yeah. I like that analogy. And it's a good prescription for humans,
Yeah.
for pets, for trees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
clean water, take care of your soil, and
Right.
be happy, eat good food.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of it,
That's what you can do. Yeah.
like I look outside, we have, almost 6 acres here, and then we're backed up by hundreds of acres of protected green space, and we're an aquifer. And so we take it very seriously what is on our soil and also who comes here, just energetically because we're sort of like on the cusp of like the last we're at the border of what is being protected behind us,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the last green space of Austin, which is booming and growing, but
Wow.
we're on the border of this acres and acres of land that is now protected. So if it just kind of feels like we're holding it and
Yeah.
hugging it and just kind of like looking around, like trying to
Yeah.
protect what goes into it. And so we do just we feel very protective of that. But we also feel that we receive blessing from all of the
Mm.
plants and the trees in return, sort of like a gratitude, like thank you, thanks for watching out for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the
Wow.
animals that come in and they're like thanks for taking care of all of these plants because now we have food, no 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 no. We've been really trying hard to steward it, but when we do that, it's such a give and take. You notice that when you take care of the world takes care of you. You take care of the earth takes care of you. Take care of the
Right.
animals, they take care of you. You take care of your body takes care of you.
Right. Right.
It's just constant, like a give and take, give and take. What you give, you get back in any relationship to anything. So you'll see it everywhere, but it's just important when we're talking about our health. You will see it in
Yeah.
your body,
Oh yeah.
in terms and in relationship to how you take care of your body will take care of you.
Yeah, you're very wise. I mean, these are, Rene Descartes back in, I don't know if it was like the 17th century, whenever he was alive, 16th century, something like that. He's the one that was, I think therefore I am, I believe it was Rene Descartes. He, he's the one that kind of created this model of what the human being is, right? You can take the parts out, clean them up and put them back together, just like an Oldsmobile, right? And then you drive off and you're healthier than you were before. And we know that that's not any more true than you can take the components of a carrot apart and put them back together and you get a carrot again. But we tend to forget that we're a part of something here. We're a part of a bigger system. And I do OBGYN work and I do hospice work. And as a hospice physician, I see time and time again people dying, putting themselves into a lead lined casket and then into a concrete tomb, which is, to me, is I've been so contemplative about this notion that we are so convinced that we are not a part of something bigger, like Earth, let's just say like nature, our biosphere, that we don't play a role here in some way, that we don't even want to allow our bodies to be reabsorbed easily back into Mother Earth's arms.
Mhm. Mm.
I mean, there's a recycling of all of the carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and whatnot that makes up your body, but we don't even want to allow that to happen. We're so desperate to maintain this idea that we are just this special, some of our parts that walks around and takes what it needs from nature as it needs it, as opposed to realizing
Mm.
the beauty and really the relief that there is a whole biosphere out here that is caring for our health. And that's why the water, the earth, the soil, that's why these things actually matter. We are a part of something bigger. And if we can work with that as opposed to siloing ourselves off from nature and being afraid of the cicadas that are buzzing around outside my window and being afraid of getting dirty and like being in the soil and being barefoot on the grass, like if we can get over that, there is so much health to be gained, right? And I have this notion right now that I think the way that we fix our country's health is people just need to start getting back to growing their own food. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's like if you can dig your hands into the soil and like smell that humus with the tilth, like it changes your biochemistry. But instead, we're smelling air conditioning and we're smelling like all of our cleaning products, and we're stuck in this 69-degree controlled temperature all day long, and we fail to we just fail to get ourselves out into the sunshine and get sweaty and take our shirt off and just pound the clay. I mean, that's really what's lacking, because that's where we belong. I mean, we belong outside. We belong out with those critters in your backyard. And if we're not willing to identify that and to rebalance that, we're not going to do this alone. And even like Elon Musk and whatnot, they're all like, oh, we're going to propose moving to Mars in 25 years. Like, how are we going to survive without our biosphere? Like we are an integral part of this space. You can't just transplant humans to another place and expect that we're going to do okay, you know?
We complain when it gets over 89 degrees or, or under 40, right?
Right.
Like people are losing their shit. I don't know how he thinks we're going to survive on this other planet in any level of
Right.
discomfort that we have not even experienced.
Right.
If
Right.
we can't even
Right.
adjust to thermal
Right.
changes.
Right. Right.
I'm like, bye, see ya, have fun with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm imagining like if a person dies in outer space, like on Mars, we're just gonna like eject them into like
Yeah,
like
just
out
like
into
slowly
space.
push them.
Yeah. Right. Just let
That's
them like
like our
trickle
Viking
away.
funeral. Just like
Right.
they're
Right.
Estestoop
Yep. Yep.
off
And they
planet.
just float away. It's ridiculous, but it's like we have gotten so detached from the natural reality of who we are that we just don't, it's more like, what is the new greatest thing I can add in, as opposed to like taking out all the toxic shit and just living a life of being at peace with our nature. I mean,
No, that's too
yeah,
simple.
yeah, that's way too simple. Yeah. That's my whole therapeutic process. If anybody ever wants to come to me for some help, that's what we're going to talk about. So
Well, that's my routine.
surprise.
It's funny, we must have walked some similar paths in a former life. For anyone who ever hears this or is, and you're into that or not, I'm into it. I believe there are parallel things going on all the time beyond space and time of here and now.
Yep.
And because every day, 4 o'clock, that's how I get grounded. That's how I transition. I take my teacher hat and CEO hat off, and I put my mom hat and my wife hat on. So I have to have a way to transition. And so in order to do that, I got to get grounded. So that means I got to go outside, and it doesn't matter how cold it is, doesn't matter how hot it is. I go outside and I get my feet in the dirt. I get my hands in the dirt. We have gardens, and we have the deer and the birds and all of our animals out there. And I'm working on all our little pathways and just all over the place, and our plants. And I come in and I'm just sweat. I got, what do they call this? Boob sweat. The under boob is just
Yeah, under boob sweat. I think
under boob sweat like no one's business. And I've
that's
just
the
got
code.
grass grass cuttings and dirt and just everything all over me. But I'm not even aware of it until I'm walking back to the house. And then I'm like, ugh,
Yeah.
yeah, then I start itching and then I'm like wiping
Sure.
it off of me. But when I'm in the dirt and I'm doing the work, I'm not even aware of it,
Yeah.
until I'm back to the house. I'm like, oh, my eyebrows are sweating,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I'm so connected to the earth and the plants and everything. And it's such a way to uh, realize, and it's not even a realization. It's not even an awareness. It's just a connection that allows one to know, I guess, how small yet how big you are.
Hmm.
Because I am no less than the tree, but I'm also so much less significant, but also so connected and important and everything. And I find that out because of that tree, and because of how that tree is so connected to this tree, and then the squirrel and the birds and everything, just watching how nature
Yeah.
works
Yeah.
together. And also, nothing fools nature.
Right.
You can't fool nature. There's
Right.
just laws, and they all follow these laws, not because they're rule followers, but because that's just how it is. And it's a beautiful system. And
Yeah.
we are the only species, it seems, that tries to figure out a way to forfeit these things
It's like
or hack them.
outsmarting it in some, yeah, the biohack thing. I'm like so
Yeah,
over the term. Like it's not, you're not hacking anything. You're observing biochemistry and you're adapting to your environment and yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, yeah. I was speaking of laws of nature, bioidentical hormones. Can we segue into that? What do you think? Perimenopause,
Yeah.
menopause.
So let's like so yeah, sure, absolutely. I think another really interesting avenue here is how we manage birth. But sort
Yes,
of
I do.
talk
Because
about a deviation from nature.
on a side note, I think it's such a beautiful thing that you do. What you do is, I don't, management's not the word. And I mean, holding space doesn't even seem like a
Mm.
significant word for what you do.
I think holding space. I think that's it. That's a lot more complicated than people think it is. It's
Yeah,
like the art of
I'm
doing
just
nothing.
thinking of like for someone to hear that. I hear it and I think it takes a lot. But I want to emphasize that in some way, but I'll leave it at that.
Sure.
For beginning of life, but as well as the ending of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, whoa, like whoa, like all I can think of is whoa. I don't even know how to, what you do. Words, I can't word. I can't even put the words,
Yeah.
the word.
You just made word a verb. I can't word.
I just use word as sentence. I can't, and I'm usually quite good at
Yeah.
sentences. I don't, it's just, I, it,
It's a lot.
I've
It's a
never
lot.
met
What I
anyone who does that and is like you and has that lifestyle too, by the way, who follows these values that you do and is
yeah.
so aligned with that and all of those. And you're, I just like, it's just, are there other people like you? Are,
I don't know. I haven't really found anybody like me. Which is good because I can only be me. So,
Sure.
and if
Yeah.
anybody wants to be like me, you can't because it's already taken, right?
Well, I mean, in terms of like medical doctors and
Yeah,
holding this much compassion and curiosity and
sure.
determination and yeah, all
I
those things.
think I think that the medical training process really does beat the creativity out of you. It beats the critical thinking out of you because you're expected to sort of practice the way that the guidelines say you're supposed to practice, but they are only guidelines. So my oversight body is ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and what they say is not what goes, but you can certainly fall back onto them as new stuff arises. And maybe 10 years after some new publication, ACOG will say, yeah, this actually does seem to be the right thing for us to be doing. And then everybody kind of changes their practice slightly. And it's usually a 1 degree shift. And that wasn't good enough for me. what was good enough for me is like, hey, here's this person sitting in front of me, and I don't care what ACOG is saying. It's not working for this
And the
person. So
average is
what can I
10
do?
years after
I
something?
mean, that's the general cycle of how research. I mean, you don't have one landmark study come out. I mean, a landmark study is maybe like this giant, massive undertaking that would change practices right away. But most medical literature, these studies are being done over maybe a year or two, and then it's published a year or two after that, and then it's then there's somebody else. Like the whole key is you have to have somebody that can reproduce that study. And then, oh man, there's another big study that came out that also found that maybe we are doing this thing wrong. And then it's a couple years after that that everybody kind of starts leaning in a slightly different direction to change a practice, So it's not like a study just comes out and suddenly everybody's like, oh, Craig, let's do something different that we haven't done for 50 years. Like that
Right.
wouldn't be responsible either, because you have like maybe some poorly done study that suggests something that isn't helpful,
Right.
and then we're too quick to adopt it. So let me utilize. I can actually utilize hormone replacement therapy to sort of illustrate this a little bit, um,
Okay.
because the way that that my practice has gone is that if I can't be creative in how I'm helping people, then I guess I don't belong in allopathic medicine. I must have made the wrong choice. And so what I'm trying to do is apply my tools in some situations while also continuing to investigate what is the underlying cause of this, this disease process or complaints or symptoms or whatever. Uh, so anyways, I feel like I keep evading your question. So that's why I'm trying to go back to the hormone replacement stuff. This is a bit of a tricky space for me, and I preface everything with that because there's really no clear answer about hormone replacement therapy. We've we've used hormones since like the 60s and 70s. In fact, at one point it was a pretty highly sought after thing. It was sort of like the sort of advent of like the beauty and anti-aging and all that other stuff. And when women go through menopause, they feel a dramatic drop in their vitality, right? It's over 5 to 10 years, and they feel less libido. Um, they feel less vital. They don't have as much energy. Their hair starts becoming falling out. Their skin is thinning. Their nails are becoming brittle. So when we started introducing hormone replacement therapy, it was this like, wow, I feel like I'm 25 again. Maybe not 25, but I feel like I've got my life back. And so there's some really important therapeutics here. The question I always have, and this goes through coronavirus and everything else, in what we've been talking about, is if you're going to deviate from the path of nature, then the burden of proof is on you to show me that that's actually the right way to go. So what this naturally led to was, hey, you're not menopausal yet, but hey, if you start taking these hormones now, you're going to feel like a fucking rock star. Sorry if you can't say that on your podcast, but um,
Plus,
and so
people are used to me cussing whenever I'm passionate. So
okay,
all
so
for it.
that's I guess I can start cussing then because I'm pretty passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, when I get passionate, I use a lot of the F's.
A lot of the F words, yeah, nice, okay. So, so what eventually developed was in the 90s, they had the Women's Health Initiative. It was this long-term trial to see how do women respond to hormone replacement therapy, and is there potentially some downside to doing this, namely coronary artery disease,
Yeah.
venous thromboembolic events. Is there issues with? Are there some benefits maybe to bone fracture risk? Are there some benefits to cancer risk? Like it was like, let's just look at the run of the gamut. And what they found um, initially was, whoa, this actually seems to be harmful for patients who are well into the menopausal period. But when and what I mean by that is that, you can either do combined estrogen and progesterone, or you can do estrogen alone. And if you're taking estrogen alone, um, you will find that some of the benefits actually may outweigh the risks. But if you add this progesterone component, something suddenly changes. So in the Women's Health Initiative, they found that if you were combining progesterone and estrogen, you'd have a decreased risk of bone fracture, you'd have decreased risk of colon cancer, you may have an improvement of your um, some of the vulvovaginal symptoms, the dryness and whatnot that comes with that. But then you may also see an increased risk of coronary artery disease, which could lead to MI, stroke, cardiac arrest,
Mhm.
breast cancer, and these venous thromboembolic events like blood clots, pulmonary embolisms, strokes. But
That's
no,
the addition of progesterone.
with the addition of progesterone, right? So then they reevaluated and they were like, well, hold on. If you just were on estrogen, there's actually a decreased coronary artery disease risk. There's decreased risk of invasive breast cancer. There's a decreased fracture rate. And by the way, none of these were statistically significant. But you didn't see like, it didn't seem like there was a blaring red flag that this is harmful, you know? There was
Mhm.
also an increased risk of stroke, but no change in death rate. And by the way, no change in no mortality rate for those patients either. So for
Mhm.
either of the groups. So the the Women's Health Initiative, the data kept getting reanalyzed over and over and over again. Then they found that women who were premenopausal were actually finding some cardioprotective effect of hormone replacement therapy, meaning or suggesting at least that perhaps this drop in hormones that occurs around menopause, basically your ovaries stop responding to the brain's gonadotropins, FSH and LH. It stops growing follicles, and so you stop ovulating. So you don't get the benefit of estrogen or progesterone that comes from active ovaries. And the loss of those hormones is what leads to some of these risk factors like the osteoporosis risks, the coronary artery disease, et cetera. And so through this study, it's been reanalyzed over and over and over again. We don't really know, but that's ACOG's stance right there. And the question for me is that there isn't a right answer that comes from a study. The right answer comes from me talking to you, Sarah, and saying, listen, you seem pretty miserable with your vulvovaginal dryness. You seem pretty miserable with your lack of libido, lack of vitality. A lot of women who take hormone replacement therapy really enjoy this. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying you, Sarah.
I'm
You have
just, I couldn't control that. I'm like, "Bleh, that is not
no,
a problem with me."
no. I
But
I didn't mean to put you in the hot seat there.
probably
I'm
over.
treating you like my patient. Sorry about that.
Let me see if I can put my actor
Yeah,
face.
yeah. You are now my actor. You're my what do they call it in med school? It was a
Yeah,
we had a special word for like
the
actors that would come in.
mock trials of
Mock yeah, mock patients. So
yeah.
what I would say to you, and this goes for anything, for any doctor who's not engaging you in a shared decision making process, find a new doctor. And I'm not promoting myself. I don't actually make money through my work. It's on a gifting platform, and I can talk about that later. But the um the conversation should go like, listen, I hear that you're having some problems. Let's talk more. Let's do a full physical exam. Let's like check everything out. And then if you're asking about hormones, here's what the literature shows. Here's what we think we can glean from this. Some people have an increased risk of bad things happening. Not everybody, and certainly people who are not yet menopausal may actually have some benefits, right? Just like I described.
Hmm.
If the risks of those things outweigh the perceived benefits that you may glean from this therapy, then it's probably not the right thing for you. If
Right.
you are so desperate to fix these things, including just having some topical estrogen, if you're like 65 and wanting to get your groove back, some topical estrogen in the vaginal area, around the vulva, around the urethra, can lead to incredible increases in quality of life. If that's the case for you, now that I've given you the risks and all that other stuff, then I'm happy to write that for you, to write those prescriptions. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I've had many clients, and students as well, who have, they've had the Dutch test done, and
Mm-hmm.
then it'll come back. They're in their, late 30s up to maybe early 50s, and this is average. And
Yeah.
then it's like, yeah, you have your estrogen is low comparatively, and then bam, there's here, go to this compounding pharmacy, and here's your estrogen, progesterone, bioidentical hormones, and then they start taking them. And what I notice, because just backing up a little bit, like you, I haven't found anything just in terms of the science that says it's really bad or it's really good. It says both. It says it can lead to these things. Here's the risks,
Right.
but also here's all the benefits. That's all
Mm-hmm.
I have found in terms
Right.
of bioidentical hormones. So
Yeah.
I have like really no opinion on it,
Right.
other than it sounds like it's a risk versus benefit.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of my clients within that age range, mostly early 40s to early 50s,
Yeah.
that they take a Dutch test, and here's all your hormones are this. So here, go get them balanced and raise them up, and you're going to feel great. But then they do, and it seems that some other thing tends to follow. once they start taking the bioidentical hormones. Something tends to follow that. It's either gut issues or sleep issues, headaches, um,
Hmm.
uh, something, immune system. So those seem to be the big ones: the immune system, the digestion, the sleep or headaches seem to be a new arising thing after
Right.
being on the
Right.
bioidentical hormones. Oh, but I am losing weight finally again, or my skin is clearing up though. My hair does feel better,
Yeah.
but a new thing pops up. So I don't,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am, I do have more energy now. I am more motivated to work out.
Right. Right.
So, I don't know, like you have to pick
Yeah. I mean, it's
one.
exactly right. It's exactly right.
And I feel like sometimes we are always looking at the hormone because we're women and we have I feel like whenever there's a problem, we are always looking at the hormones for women. It must be the hormone imbalance. It must be the thyroid. That tends to be the thing. But like, what is causing the hormone imbalance?
Right.
Is it menopause? Is it perimenopause?
Is it diet? Yeah. Is it something
Right.
else?
Could
Yeah.
it be something else? Because where are the hormones made?
I'll
Like
be right
where?
back. I hear my dog barking outside. I have to go let her in. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Go. Yeah. Intermission. Okay, I'm going to ask Mallory's question about birth interventions. And then hopefully get into endometriosis. If we have time for that. He's being so gracious about his time. He's the greatest.
Oh, thank you.
No, you're
Sorry
welcome.
about that. Sorry for that brief break. Yeah. So, yeah, you bring up a really good point. I mean, so the one thing I always caution people about is that if you are supplementing with hormones, and this goes for men who are like feeling invigorated on testosterone therapy,
Right.
hormones work through feedback systems. So you have some signals in the body that tell, your organ systems, your glands, your, brain structures, pituitary, hypothalamus, to release more of stuff. And then there's other signals that tell it to release less of stuff.
Yep.
And normally, and the way that this works let's talk about menopause for a second. So the brain secretes something called FSH and LH, right? From the pituitary. They travel down through your blood to the ovaries, and they tell the ovaries to build follicles, right? Grow follicles. Inside the follicles each follicle is an ovum. And the process of the follicle developing releases estrogen, and um, you also get progesterone, from this egg cracking open. And those two hormones also regulate menstruation, which is bleeding. So ovulation and menstruation are separate conversations. What happens in menopause is you have less of those follicles responding to FSH and LH, the gonadotropins from the brain. And estrogen feeds back to the brain to say, hey, like, if you have a lot of estrogen, it feeds back to the brain to say, hey, we're good. We're good with FSH, LH. Thanks. We don't need any more. But if you don't have follicles developing, like around the perimenopausal period,
Mm-hmm.
FSH and LH get pumped out at higher and higher volumes, right? In order to try to eke out some ovulation from the ovaries. So you can imagine if you are suddenly supplementing with estrogen and progesterone, or estrogen alone for that matter, you're going to get this feedback system to the brain. It's going to tell the brain, hey, stop making FSH and LH. Well, that presumes that FSH and LH, number one, don't have any other function in the body, right? And that the only thing that this whole system is about is estrogen and progesterone, which
Yeah.
it may be.
Hmm.
But what else is actually being, if you're telling the brains to stop making those things, what other substances are not being, produced by the brain?
Right.
And the same goes actually for testosterone. I always tell
Yeah.
people like, hey, we don't know that you're not messing up some other cycle, some other endocrine axis within the body if you're supplementing with this hormone. We love to see things in isolation, and just like Descartes wanted to see the body as the sum of these parts. These endocrine axes all work together. So the direct activity of FSH and LH on the ovaries is known, but there may be some other secondary effect at the bone marrow or at the thyroid or whatever else, and we know that these are all connected. So
Yeah.
I always tell people, like, there is some unforeseen risks, but if you are miserable, you're totally miserable, then taking oral hormone replacement therapy might actually be beneficial to you, and it may outweigh those possible risks. And I have had women who tell me like, hell yeah, let's do it. On the
Hmm.
other hand, if you're not yet menopausal and you're starting to find that you feel like you're approaching menopause and it's maybe a little bit too early, I think one of your listeners actually asked this.
Yeah.
What other thing, again, take a step back, what other things in my lifestyle might actually be impacting the experience I have with menstruation and therefore maybe ovulation? You might be going into premature menopause, or it could be something else that you're eating. It could be that new supplement that has some weird additive that's messing with your hormone systems.
Yeah.
Um, and so it takes a very thoughtful practitioner to help kind of dissect what is really going on here with these things. And normally the answer is just to take, you probably need to take something away as opposed to adding something to the equation.
And could things like, I mean, because one of the big stressors that I teach is like, chemical stress, nutritional stress. Of
Hmm.
course, there's the physical stress. You get injuries, surgeries, illness, things like that. If you're not exercising or if you're exercising too much. But another big one is EMF.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are hearing a bit about 5G implementations, but there is other stuff like um, MRIs,
Hmm.
X-rays,
Hmm.
CAT scans, things like that. If someone is going through a series of illnesses where they have to have repeat MRIs, like on top of living in a condo building with a 5G tower on top, and being exposed where they're working at a university that has a big research lab,
That's right. That's
like
right.
that can arguably bring on a lot of these types of symptoms, especially for a woman, right? With who's very peripherally sensitive to those things.
Yeah.
Would you
That's
agree to that?
exactly that's exactly right. We talk a little bit about so we should maybe even talk about birth control pills, because I hate birth control pills. I think that if a person wants it and they really want it and they understand the risk benefits, fine, like we'll do it. But I think it's one of the um I think it's a really tricky technology, right? Like what we are doing with that is we're basically replacing that system. And if you go in a continuous cycle, the ovaries don't have to do anything. They can just sit there and lay complacent for years and years and on end. And as you and I have already discussed, if you're bleeding regularly for 3 to 5 days a month and it's not too heavy, and it's kind of like in line with a lot of what your friends are experiencing, right? Like, you're probably okay. But if that changes, there's something subtle that happened, and it could be diet, it could be water, it could be any of these toxic things. And EMF actually has been listed. I think it was at the World Health Organization that actually has it listed as a potential toxic substance. It's not a substance the way that we think of like eating arsenic, but if the sensitivity of how these axes work, I always relate that there's a reason that things happen on full moons. Like, that is not an exaggeration. As an OBGYN, I will tell you the weirdest stuff in the labor and delivery suite happened on a full moon. If it's if you consider just how sensitive some of this stuff operates, and how it connects you to nature, then and that we are all really made up of vibrational energy. I mean, down below your cells, below your atoms, into the bonds between atoms that are vibrating, right? And if you've taken even 101 physics, you know all of this.
99.9999%.
Yeah, there you go. So it's all empty space. Is that what you mean? Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So what's happening in that space? What's happening in that space? You know, and that's where, I mean, our friend Paul Check, he introduced me to a whole bunch of really cool books that was like, damn, this is like really helping me. It's not helping me question things, it's helping me explain it, you know, to myself, like the observations I have as a scientist, that if you think that sitting next to a microwave, right, or whatever, a cell phone tower or whatever, doesn't potentially disrupt some of these endocrine axes, then you're completely delusional. um and I mean, there's a reason that we don't recommend you get x-rays in pregnancy, or that you are getting CTs in pregnancy, because there's some very vital structures, like all of these little hourglasses, right? These little communication patterns, these cycles, this harmony, the harmonization of the human being, that life force is being generated at that time. And it's no surprise whenever stuff doesn't get folded the right way, if we blast it with radiation. So even early in pregnancy, like we got one ultrasound when my wife's pregnant now. So we got one ultrasound early on, because there is some data to suggest that, like, hey, by listening to that heartbeat every 2 weeks or something, you're pumping heat into the system, and heat causes stuff to vibrate faster. So this is not like woo woo. This is actually very legitimate science. It's just that the medical establishment and the media doesn't really seem to want to pay attention to it. So
You can see it in babies too. When you have,
yeah,
you do, it
yeah.
annoys the shit out of them.
They're like, what is that? It's like you're
Like,
blowing a hair dryer on them or
wait,
something.
like, and they're like trying to turn away from it, you know? And then you have the tech that's trying to like manipulate the mommy's belly to get the baby's
Right.
butt and make the baby turn around. And the baby's like, get the hell away from me.
Get
Like,
off of me.
trying
Yeah.
to move
Yeah.
away because it
Yeah.
does not like that. It doesn't like
Right.
it.
Right.
So
Right.
instinctually, even even if it's at fetus stage still, it's like
Uh-huh.
it's
Uh-huh.
just instinctually just trying to get away from whatever that
Sure.
vibration is.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you go out into the woods and you've got your cell phone on 5G, your experience in the woods will be different. And not all of us allow ourselves to be sensitive to this reality. But I mean, you've got a supercomputer that's getting just, there's these like waves bouncing off of everything in our life. And this is kind of the new, like a new step in that direction, like us talking about these things. But there's very, very few medical scientists that are really trying to help the public understand this. I don't have the answers again, and I don't think you do either. But to say that there isn't something to these giant cell towers and everything going up everywhere, like that's a little bit, it sounds dystopic even talking about it the way that we have. For us to say that there's not something to it and it doesn't warrant further investigation, to me again is unscientific.
Yeah.
um, so I think that the endocrine axes are a first indicator that there's something in your environment. Like if that's gone awry, there's something in your environment that is amiss. And there are certain conditions in which your ovaries just stop working at a very, very early age. There's like Fragile X syndrome is an example. There's other genetic predispositions to premature ovarian failure, but that's a very, very, very small number of people. Um, So I guess in summary of the hormone replacement therapy stuff, I think risks and benefits always have to be considered, and then alternatives, right? There are a lot of herbal remedies for vasomotor symptoms. That's the hot flushing and all that other stuff. If that's the only thing that's bugging you, or the vulvovaginal dryness, there's a lot of good lubrication. There's all these other things that we can work through, including dietary changes and the like, that might actually outweigh, that might be better for you than going straight to hormones, because I don't want to mess with your endocrine axes. In some ways also, we need to just accept that aging is like you're now an elder, like you're a person that has all this information, and science and society doesn't really value people of older age, because you're not producing, right? You're not producing as part of the capitalistic model anymore.
Oh, I
But
think
like,
that's just a bunch of crap.
I do too. I do too. I do too.
I
But
think I think we're the most useful.
I think I totally agree. I totally agree.
Like Wild Woman
Mm-hmm.
narrative
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit, I don't know what the contribution is to society with that. At
Yeah.
this point, we
Right.
need to understand what our contribution is, what our power is, what our purpose is, and how we're going to share that with the way that we are shifting very
Yeah.
rapidly.
Yeah.
Um, a lot
Yeah.
of the potential wise women out there are going to have very rude awakening if they don't figure that out now because
Yeah.
they're too busy with their body glitter and festivals and authentic meing, um,
Yeah.
which is important. You know, you got to go through that. But at what point are you going to really truly step into that? Because yeah, you know, this and you don't have to be 40, 50, 60, 70 to be a wise woman. You can start honing in on that early.
Yeah.
But like you said, there is a stigma of premenopause, menopause, of how women, which is why I think women in those stages of their life really do want to, like, you know, get their hormones checked and look
Yeah.
to bioidentical hormones because they
Mm-hmm.
want to be useful, um,
Right.
slash youthful,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because there's something about youth that makes them feel contributable, useful. But
Yeah.
really, the age is the wisdom, and that's
Yeah.
what
We need to change that. Yeah.
really,
Well, I
really.
mean, consider where we're starting from here, right? Like currently, I mean, we even have this notion that the vagina is a dirty space, right? Like there was a period of time where people were swabbing the vagina before a baby comes out, like pouring iodine. Even when I was in residency training, there were still docs
Wow.
that would come in and like splash iodine as if coming through the dirty vagina is going to be bad for the baby.
Oh,
This goes back to like Roundup and everything else. Like we're sterilizing our environment because this like ickiness of birth, right? So I mean, the way that we talk about periods, the way that people are like, this might be TMI, but my periods have been a little off. And it's like, why
hilarious.
is that TMI? Like, we should be talking about periods. We should be showing what menstruation looks like. We should be celebrating the fact that women get to bleed every month. And that's not a popular opinion. People are like, how would you know? And I wouldn't know. But I'm telling you that we have to change the story about women's role in society. Like you guys are already making kids, like you're creating life and then feeding them with your breasts. Like
Yeah.
you guys are the queen bee. Us little men should be circulating around you and keeping you safe. Like that should be that's the divine masculine role. Um,
Which
but
is funny, the
instead it's
vagina. It's you know, when I found out, when we really succumbed to that or submitted to the idea that, you know,
sure.
the, you know, I was gonna have a C-section again. We were taking saline, you know, they were, you know, pads, and basically literally wiping my vagina and inside everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
keep and storing it. Because the second they took Ari
Yeah.
out, Alex went and was just like wiping,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically wiping her with my vagina,
Trying to
with
get the
my
bugs all
dirty
over her.
vagina,
Mhm.
so that she could get as much of a vaginal birth as she could. That's
Yeah. So
funny.
I
They were
there was
teaching
an
me to sterilize,
yeah.
whereas we were taking as much of my dirtiness and wiping it all over her.
It's like little baby Simba with like covered in vaginal bacteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so when I was in residency, there were a lot of things I got called to the principal's office for. And there was one time when I brought it up, I was like, yeah, she wants to do she's like really worried about a C-section because she doesn't want the baby to miss out on the vaginal flora. So I was like, could we just like I found this study, could we just start wiping the babies with like just get a sponge and wipe the baby, you know, wipe the vagina and then like just cover the baby. And people thought that was like the most insensitive, like disgusting thing for a white man to be saying in residency. And I get it that, I mean, a big problem is that we live in this patriarchal, you know, corporatocracy within maternity care. And we can totally get into that if you'd like. But the simple notion that like we can't even understand that there might be some benefit for the baby coming through the vagina, not just for bonding, not just for, hey, maybe this is like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis.
Right.
Like forget all the other metaphors. Just get that baby out of there through an incision in the belly or whatever. I mean, it's just like we've lost the respect for the the symbiosis and our role within this like natural space. Like babies come out through the vagina. Sometimes they have to come out through by C-section. And in your case, Sarah, of course, it sounds like they really kind of ran out of options. And I've done a lot of C-sections where it's like, damn, this is just one of those C-sections that we just have to do. But 50% of the time, we're not even thinking about the role of the flora,
Yeah.
and how it might populate the baby's GI tract and provide some sort of immunity and support their endocrine systems and their brain development and whatnot later. And now, fortunately, we're actually seeing like, oh crap, like vaginal birth is better than C-section. It's like we needed a bunch of like old white
Weird.
guys at Harvard to tell us that.
So weird. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
But, of all three of my C-sections, the third one, we seeded her. That's what they call it, seeding.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right. And Alex is such a strong partner in terms of like, he was there and he told all the physicians there, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you can expect from me. And if any of you try to, in the process of it,
Yeah.
go back on your word or convince me otherwise, that I cannot take my daughter right away and put her on her boob. If you try to do that, I will create a very potentially unsafe environment in that room. And he was just very assertive. And they were like, we got it. So he did. He took her right away. And within less than a minute, she was like,
on the boob.
yeah, like what do you call those little things you stick on the windows?
Yeah, like a window cling or something.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, and then as she was doing that, he's just wiping.
Yeah.
And, my other two older daughters who I have with another man, my former husband, he was a very different guy, very sciencey. His brother is a physician, and so he's very like, well, what does my brother say? Like, I don't know about all this, so he's very if it didn't come from a headline from businessinsider.com or his brother, right? So very different births. But so Ari, who was seated on the boob right away, never had a vaccine, is the healthiest, even though all three were C-sections, healthiest kid of all of them. She has never been to a doctor, never had antibiotics. She's only been sick once. She's 5 now. And that was like an ear infection. She had like a cold, and it kind of like turned into like sinus that drained into the ears or something that became. But that's it. One time. And this kid is like the healthiest kid on the planet. So it's just such a vast of what I feel the birth experience can truly set the stage, whether it's vaginal or C-section or whatever, for that health of the child and the human experience of that child and mother from there. And so, my friend Mallory had asked a question about that because, her job is supporting women, like the friend you were talking about, where a lot of the doctors that she works with her clients, they always say, yes, you can birth on hands and knees. But then, as she said, when it comes time to push, the doctor makes the woman get in the stirrups. So she doesn't know how to bridge that gap of and letting a woman choose, having all that information. And when a woman is in the hospital and it comes time to push, there is no moment of a woman in that position, like who has a team of medical professionals saying, now we have to do this.
Right.
I've been in that position several times, and I can say, if I didn't have some people who would say no and have my back, and even then, I would be very scared and intimidated. I would do exactly what the physician says. I'd be terrified. And I have been terrified. And so how do we prevent those things? How do we prevent those types of interventions and allow the woman to have more of a choice, autonomy, and a say in how she experiences her birth? Now, her and her child experience the birth. Um,
Mhm.
do you know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
I feel like
Yeah.
my question could be a 5-minute question.
No, I mean, I live this. This is what I live, and I wrote an essay back when I left hospital-based birth that demonstrated that exactly. That's exactly why I left. And now I'm more in the home birth space and kind of going to people where they're at, which is which is I don't want to say it's a shame because it's actually quite nice to just be in people's homes. But the the reality is that the medical community, and I'm talking about the medical model that you gave birth in, still sees this as a pathology. It still sees, you know, pregnancy as an opportunity to prevent something bad from happening. And unfortunately, sometimes bad things happen in birth. In the mammal world, like we can't reduce outcomes down to zero, bad outcomes down to zero. And that's just a reflection of our fear of mortality. Like we hate to acknowledge that some babies may not make it through. Um, and so having said that, the vast majority of babies are born completely, like they would be born completely without any consequence through the vagina, and um, in whatever position the mother feels most comfortable pushing,
Yeah.
whether it's standing, it's sitting, squatting, on all fours, whatever else. And I think a big problem is that we've adopted this language because we see ourselves as the guarantors of a good outcome. Which, by the way, if you're an OB/GYN out there listening, or a midwife or whatever, it is not your job to ensure a good outcome. Just like with the HRT conversation, it's your job to provide the risks, benefits, and alternatives, and maybe even a recommendation based on your experience. And
Hmm.
then when they make a decision, it's your job then to support them in that decision. That's where expertise comes into play. It's not doing a protocolized, okay, it's time to push, get on your back and pull your knees up to your ears. Like that's not your job. I
Okay.
know that's how you were trained, and I know that that's what you've done, and I know it's worked for many people,
Mhm.
but that is not your job to tell a person how to give birth. It's your job to support them and to get the training that allows them to birth in permits them to birth, I should say, in whichever way they feel safest. Fear and fear and stress in the childbirth process is probably the number one factor that makes things go awry from the natural physiologic birth process. So if you have to arm yourself to the teeth with nearly physical threats in order to get things the way you want them, that's probably not setting you off onto the right labor path anyways. Unless you're very, very true to who you are, and you don't feel like you're having to look over your shoulder at every moment. So the birth plan is a really great way to start. But then I think also people just need to ask themselves, if I don't feel safe here in this hospital, if I don't feel like I'm being respected, then I probably need to figure out some other way to do this. And I think that OBGYNs get into this sort of holding pattern of like, I need to keep them safe. I need to keep them safe. I need to keep them safe. And they make recommendations without engaging a person in a shared decision-making process.
Mm.
So you don't know what a person's past traumas have been like, whether it's been that they were raped in college, and even being touched by a man, especially by a stranger, might be a problem.
Mhm.
The process of having birth, whether it's a C-section or a totally natural physiologic vaginal birth, it's a trauma. Like you are stepping through a portal. It's a transformation of spirit for both mother and baby. And there is something beautiful and sacred to that.
Yeah.
And if we fail to recognize that, then we fail to realize the gravity of what this woman went through 2 years ago when she was rushed to the operating room for a C-section because the baby was, quote, going to die if they didn't do it. So when doctors do engage in shared decision making, they'll say something like, "Hey, I'm a little bit worried about the baby. I think we should do a C-section." Well, is it necessary? Well, I mean, you wouldn't want your baby to die, right? I mean, I just want healthy mom, healthy baby, don't you? What you're using is coercive language to get them to agree to the
Right.
plan that you want to put into place, because that's where your comfort zone is. It has nothing to do with her comfort zone or where she feels safe. And if her safety, her sense of safety and sense of I'm being heard and being seen here is important to her surviving childbirth, then you're actually doing more harm than good.
Right.
I'm in a really tough spot right now because I don't think that birth is being done well in the hospitals. I think that if you choose to have a birth center birth, it's probably a step in the right direction, but there's so many state regulations as to what can happen inside birth centers that you're still kind of being tucked away into a box
Mm.
under the permission of state legislators and hospital administrations, and the OBGYN community at large, because they don't support home birth. Generally speaking, they don't support home birth. And then that leaves us with home birth and
Yeah.
this perceived sort of, it's a perversion of what home birth actually even looks like by the media. You know, it's this dangerous place where your baby's gonna die and suffer some horrible thing. Well, if you prime people to think that that's going to happen, then we tend to like steer ourselves into the pothole on the highway, you know. Whereas if you can meet a person where they're at, talk to them about their trauma, talk to them about what has life been like for you, what is important to you. If
Yeah.
you're you know, a big time weightlifter, then getting an incision across your abdomen is probably not the best thing. Like if we need you to get back to competing at that level, trying to get you a vaginal birth is even more important. But that's like just a small fragment of it. It's like, what is your worldview? And if for you, if having a C-section is the right thing, then let's get you a C-section too.
Mm.
This conversation is what I think is lacking. And if we can just train physicians to have better conversations with their patients about what makes them happy, what brings them joy, what is important to you in this pregnancy. If you are determined to not have a C-section, then let's try to do everything we can to avoid that. If you're determined and afraid to have a natural birth or a vaginal birth, tell me more about that. You know, these are the questions that we as healthcare professionals should be asking for anybody. But given the gravity and the sensitivity of birth and maternity care, like this is where our conversation skills need to be like, we need to level up here, and really get to know the people that we're purporting to serve.
Yeah. I feel like I heard all the clapping again. I feel like I heard all the,
The
yeah,
crowd
the
goes
audience was
wild.
going. I heard it again. Just you had me like silenced that whole time. I was entranced. Like I like really was connected to everything you were saying. I wanted to hear everything you were saying, um, which is difficult. Usually, for anyone engaging with me, you may learn if you ever talk to Alex or anybody else who I'm very much like Paul in some sense of the way when doing these kinds of interviews. I tend to listen, but then I'm like, oh, that reminds me of the thing that I want to share. You know, like
Mm.
I have so much up here and I just want to be like, well, also this. But when you were just talking, I was like, oh my God. Oh God.
Oh, that's
I
flattering.
he has shut up. He has made me shut up. So that doesn't happen often. I just wanted to let you
Oh, shut
know.
up, Sarah.
Very rarely do I shut up. Um, because I just have so much to say. And you just somehow had through the alchemy of your words, just like turned me off
Mm.
in that way, in a good way. But so yes, that was also good information, really good information. The way you described all of that, it like made all of that make sense. And so like really like, yep, click that, turn that key, turn that key, turn that key, like everything. It was just like a perfect way of like turning all the keys all the way down the row
Yeah.
in order. You know what I mean? Like it was just all made so much like perfect sense. You know, for me too, it was with the you know, the second C-section, I really did want to do a VBAC. My doctor was very great. She did not use coercive language at all. I went actually went into labor naturally the day after my actual due date, and she was just very. She talked me through it and never brought up C-section until my contractions started to get pretty strong, and we noticed the same pattern. Like I wasn't getting past a 6, but I also didn't want pitocin, and I didn't want
Mhm.
to do all these like drugs like they did the first one. And then because I knew what, you know, they broke my water, they gave me the
Yeah.
dose, and they did
You've
all the
heard about that domino effect. Yeah. Right.
right. Um, and so she was very supportive. And so how you're saying that my friend Shane, who was saying that his wife, the practice, he was like, I didn't know this as a dad, as a husband. Like, I didn't realize that C-sections aren't actually supposed to be this common. You
Right.
know, in the practice
Right.
they went to, they the, her OBGYN told her for almost all their children that the baby's too big to birth vaginally. And then they started hearing after the fact that like that he's telling all the patients this.
Right.
The baby's too big. The baby's too big. Well, my mom gave birth to my brother. He was almost 11 pounds. I was almost 10.
And
And
you were
this
a
is
tank.
back when they didn't have, they didn't even have ultrasounds and,
Sure.
you know, so how are they determined? Because usually anytime I did have a late end time, that's usually when we would put off getting an actual thing just to check that everything's good.
Yeah.
Usually the amount of, what do you call it? The water, just checking.
Amniotic fluid. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that they would, oh, your baby's very big. I was told that with all of my pregnancies. All my babies were born at exactly 6.9 pounds. All of them.
That's how much our baby weighed. 6'9". Yeah.
And so I thought something was wrong. Like,
Yeah.
why is my baby so tiny? But they all gained like so quickly, like
Yeah.
rapidly. Fatties. I mean, oh, especially Sydney and Ari, my second and third. They were fatties.
Big chunkers. Well, they were little tanks. They just had to gain the weight after birth, where you were a tank inside the uterus. So
They were scaring me with this like information saying,
yeah.
this is, well, it's a big baby, you know, I'm like,
So that to me is a little bit of the coercion I'm talking about. Like we
right.
don't realize that those words actually really matter. Like you can't program a person to say the baby's too big. Oh, the baby's looking too big. Like there's a subtle something. Imagine the changes in your physiology. If your pelvis is hearing like, oh, it's going to be too big. Maybe I won't relax as much. Maybe yeah. Like I don't want that. Like I can't get that big. That 11 pounds, that's a big baby.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
there's more to this than just you're not a car. You are not the sum of your uterus and your pelvis and the growing baby in there. There is a bigger something that's happening here.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I always wondered about, anytime I hear a woman say that their doctor is telling them their baby is really big and they're only at 34 weeks, but their baby is measuring at over 9.5 pounds. So already I'm like,
Yeah.
they said that about my baby. That was like
Right.
not even 7 pounds, So I don't know. I don't know what that's
Right.
all about. So yeah, I thought that that's like against sort of the rules to not use coercive language with patients. Like, I mean, isn't that kind of like against the rules?
I mean, you have to define coercive language. People don't see the way that it's used in the hospital is I don't think anybody would say, oh yeah, I'm using coercive language. That's like my jam. I don't think anybody's admitting that. I think that we were all trained really to do. Yeah. I think that we were all trained to use language that is it's sort of advertised as language that's meant to help a patient make decisions given they probably don't have the information that we do as these fancy doctors in white coats,
Right.
So I had one of my attendings in residency tell me, you can't be so lenient with your patients. They are coming to you for you to tell them what to do. And there may be some element of that, like, hey, here's what I recommend, but it's not my decision. And in fact, even if a woman is laboring and I come in and say, we need to do a C-section right now, stat, we got to get you back there. Otherwise your baby's going to die. She still has 100%. She maintains the right to refuse treatment.
Right.
So we as physicians are not trained to sit back and say, why am I having a hard time with that decision? Because we've also been trained that we cannot fail. And the ultimate failure in childbirth is if a baby dies. And so I maintain that a woman has the right to refuse. Number one, they have the right to informed decision making, informed consent, right, to hear the risks, benefits, alternatives. But then they also have the right to refuse anything. They can refuse anything. There's no, I'm going to allow you to do this. It wasn't your decision to make, like, to grant me permission. It's your job as the physician to say, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I recommend. And then it's their job to support you whenever you decide that even though you think my baby's going to die, I absolutely 100% refuse a C-section.
Hmm. What
And
about post C-section? In terms of like
Mhm.
patient choice, I think this is important because I also, this happened to me in my second C-section.
Yeah.
C-section. When they opened me up, she was asleep. She was literally asleep, and
Mhm.
I heard collective ah, and they took her out, and they literally had to like wake her up, and then she was pissed, like, oh my god, I was sleeping, why did you take me out of here?
Yeah.
um and so but her oxygen was just a little bit off, and I was asking questions, but of course I'm like this
Yeah,
strapped
right.
down,
Crucifixion style in the OR table, yeah.
which is also a little like,
Oh, yeah, it's terrible. Just
why am
yeah,
I every C-section you're crucifixion style strapped down with a
right,
sheet in front of you?
right. It's a
That's
terrible.
traumatizing also. I feel like we got to change that as well. But
Dude, there's so many things. This
yeah,
onion is so deep. It
but I'm
really.
asking questions and no one's
Mhm,
talking to me.
mhm.
They're huddled around over there and they're like, her oxygen's low. So we're going to, and then by the time I'm hearing anyone tell me any information, they're wheeling her away.
Mhm.
And I'm asking my then husband, what are they doing? And he's just explaining that it's okay. She's fine. They just have to go put some oxygen until it comes up. And I said, well, I need to be with her. And they said, well, you're going to go with her. It's no big deal. You just have to go. They have to sew you up and then you'll be with her. Then they did. They sewed me up, but then they wheeled my bed into some room and put me in an empty room with a nurse sitting on a computer. And I said, where's my baby? And they said, she's fine. Your daddy's with her. They're okay. I said, okay, well, why can't I be with my baby? You are, you're in recovery. I have to monitor you while you recover before you can go back there. I said,
Mm.
I need to be with my baby. Like, it had been already 20 minutes now, like, and I hadn't even touched her. And
Mm.
I was getting really anxious, which of course my blood pressure is going up, and
Yeah.
that's making it take longer. I don't know what they're doing to her, what shots they're giving her, what they're, you know what I mean? So then it's
Maybe they're washing off all of the stuff that you
right.
seeded. Not that you seeded that baby, but like they're giving babies baths. It's like, well,
Yes.
give the baby to the mom. Like, let her be with her mom or
And
his
then this
his
nurse is
mom.
talking to me about, oh, I'm looking at dogs. My boyfriend and I are thinking about getting a dog. And by that time, I said, I don't give a shit. Where's my baby? Take me to my baby. It had been now 45 minutes. She said, well, and then she sighed and got up, came, took my blood pressure. She said,
Oh.
looked at the little monitor thing. She's like, I think it's going to be, probably another 40 or, no, or another 15 minutes or something, something like that. And I said, this isn't okay. No one told me this. She said, well, she's okay. I promise you she's okay. Daddy's with her. I said, I know you've told me this, but no one told me that I could not be with my child. You need to take me to my child right now. She's like, I can't do that right now. You have to, you're in recovery. You have to be in recovery. I'm monitoring you until you can meet, I don't know, it was something like meet these stats. When you meet these stats, then we'll take you into your room and we'll bring the baby into the room with you. And I don't know to this day what that was, but me as the patient, I was refusing the whole time and no one was listening. So I don't know what that was. And I refused it
Sorry.
from
Yeah.
step A to Z. I was saying, no, 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 no. Like,
Mm.
they were like, sorry. But I still had anesthesia. So I just felt like, like I couldn't get up and walk. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't get up and walk. I still had no like feeling,
Mhm.
and nobody was listening to
Couldn't run. You could just drag yourself with your arms down the hallway,
I
zombie
was
style.
about to. I was
Yeah.
literally
You've got
at
guns. I think you would have been able to handle it.
this.
Oh
But
my
I
gosh.
like, is that legal? Is it legal? I just feel like, or maybe did I sign something that signed away? When you're When
Hmm.
you're entering the hospital, right? There's
Implied
got to be
consent
something
is,
that I signed, right? And for full disclosure and awareness, right? When you're, for anyone who does see or hear this, or for me to now share with, my students and stuff too. When you're entering the hospital and you sign something, there's a consent, right? Do you think that something I signed or my husband signed at the time gave them that consent that was overriding anything I said?
I'm going to take a breath there because I also just want to acknowledge that I'm sorry that you went through that in childbirth, really.
Yeah, it was really horrible.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell. I mean, this is what I'm talking about with trauma. Like that was a traumatizing experience.
Yeah.
And for somebody to not ask that if you were to get pregnant again, to not know that story about you, they wouldn't know some things that are deeply, deeply important to you and probably to Alex. So to answer your question, there's a Bill of Rights in every hospital. You can Google your hospital and then Google patient Bill of Rights, and you'll find the list of rights that you have as a patient. And it's all that stuff that I've been talking about. There's
Patient.
no way that they can, patient Bill of Rights. Yeah. And it says things like, I have the right to an informed decision making process, and whereby my physician or care provider is going to go over risks, benefits, alternatives. There's a risk that you're not going to get to be with your baby for an hour or 2 hours or a day after a C-section. That's an important part of the consent process.
Wow.
And what we end up doing is we don't violate that. There's no rules that were broken, right? Until we start as the public demanding, hey, we need to improve birth in our country. The common practice is not going to be seen by any jury of anybody, any people, because they've all seen the same process unfold over and over and over again, whereby we use language like, hey, all you want is a healthy mom, healthy baby. Does that sound coercive? It
No.
doesn't, right? But it is coercive. Is that all that you want is a healthy mom, healthy baby? No. What I actually want is to bond with the baby that I've been growing with for 9.5 months. I want to feel that I'm safe. I want my partner to be able to be at my bedside. I want the baby to see me as their mother when they open their eyes. I want them to smell me. I want to smell the baby. I want to get those natural.
Decisions about the vaccines that she got
That's right. Well,
while I
who
was
knows what's happening? And we know that hospitals do these things because it's just protocol. Well, it's protocol until we say, hey, I don't want that. But you don't give me the option to say that I don't want that, because all that I wanted was a healthy mom, healthy baby. And I
yeah.
agreed to that. So there is a consent process along the way. But what I don't want this to turn into in maternity care in the United States is for everybody to have to go in with a notarized legal document that says, you will not give my baby a bath. Like, we should not have to fight tooth and nail for every little thing. You are supposed to be in control. And it's my job to be your support person, to be your co-pilot, or even your second in command, really, is probably a more apt metaphor. So all of those things that they did, I don't know if there's a legality issue, but I will say that I work with some attorneys who are hearing on a daily basis from educated, some even physicians, who have felt equally violated in their birth. And I'm serving as expert witness in one situation, because the person was held down as a physician put her hand into her vagina to, quote, check the cervix to make sure the baby was okay, while
Mm.
the partner was asked to hold down her other side. And the partner feels complicit in what his wife is describing as rape.
Wow.
So let's say that person didn't have a history of some sort of violent traumatic thing like being raped or molested or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's not really the question. The question is, do I have your consent to do this medical procedure, placing my hand inside your vagina while you're, and if not, if I think that you've had a stroke or you're having a seizure and I need to know, then maybe that's one example in which you don't have the decision capacity, the capacity of your decision making. I need to do this thing to help you. But that is not what's happening in hospitals. It's, hang on, I'm going to check your cervix, and I jam my hand in your vagina. And then when you squirm and you say stop, I ask the nurse to hold you down. That to me sounds like a violation of a person's rights. And I am not trying to paint a nasty picture of OBGYNs out there. What I am trying to say is that when that is the customary practice that is being taught to every single resident in the United States, and not being modeled as a part of true shared decision making and compassionate care with integrity as people that join these ranks to take care of people, I'm saying that we have hit a very, very critical point. And it should be no surprise to anybody that women are choosing to have home births. In fact, you should be asking, why are people afraid to come to the hospital?
Right.
Because these
Exactly.
things are being done to them.
Yeah.
And just because you're not willing to acknowledge that they feel, or that you think that they're being absurd by comparing it to rape, that's on you. That's on you to do some deep digging and figure out, like, is this a practice that needs to change? And the answer is probably yes. It's probably not something you feel comfortable doing, but you've been doing it, and you've been doing it, and your colleagues and the culture of medicine expects you to continue treating patients as if you're the captain of the ship, and you're not.
Right.
And you have nothing to lose by just saying, I was wrong. I want to do better. And if you're out there and you want to, just call me. We'll talk about it. I don't blame you. Like, you were trained this way. And what we need to do is really, really change the tides. And what I'm hoping to do is just open my own little birth retreat and hospice center combined in one, somewhere in the woods, where we
Whoa.
eat good food and we get people healthy and we get them feeling safe and protected
Wow.
by really compassionate people. That's my future plan.
Holy moly, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I can see it.
Yeah. Me too.
I can see it.
Me too. It's there. It's there. It's just a matter of materializing it in
And I can
my
hear your dog
reality.
just howling at every birth, every time the baby comes.
Right.
Woo, just
Maybe
howl.
we can all go outside and howl. Maybe that would actually be
I would do
that's
it.
the wild woman archetype coming out
I
there.
would do it.
Yeah.
Do you know, I got to introduce you to Josh Trent. His partner Carrie, she's due any day now. I think they're at day 40. They're 40.
Oh wow, they're right
Almost
there.
41 weeks now. She's gonna do home birth. I
Good for
mean,
them.
she is a badass mamma jamma. She's like, yeah, I'm
She's
gonna
got it.
she wants to go in the backyard and just
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
picked a rock that
This
she's
is
gonna
the spot.
squat on, basically, you
Oh
know,
damn, that's amazing. Yeah.
lay some grass out, like
Sure.
completely,
Sure.
yeah, calling in the fairies and all the elements and everything. Yeah, yeah. But he runs Wellness Force podcast. He's been on Paul's a couple
I
of
think I've heard his name. Yeah, I have heard Josh's name. Yeah. He seems like a good
He
guy.
would love to talk to you on his thing. I think I gotta connect the two of you.
Yeah.
Because now that he's transitioning into fatherhood, I think he would love to connect with you. I think you guys would really make a great connection, and probably on a great show on his and or vice versa show. So yeah, side little note there. I need to connect
Yeah.
with Josh, because
Yeah, absolutely.
as soon as you said that birthing retreat, I was like, I saw it, and then I was like, Josh, I gotta.
Well, and I also want to emphasize that it is not like, not everybody has to have an all natural birth on a rock in their backyard. I think that sounds lovely, and I mean, that's how, if I was a woman, I would probably be trying to birth in my backyard or in the woods somewhere in a stream, or some place where I can just connect with, like,
Yeah.
with me. I can just be present with the experience. But even my wife and I, we had a birth in the hospital. It was a beautiful birth, and we kind of prepared the stage. I did previously attend there as an OBGYN. People kind of knew my thing and they loved my thing, and so they kind of just allowed us to have that space.
Mhm.
I guess what I'm trying to emphasize is that it's nobody's damn business what a
Right.
woman wants to do with her body. I mean, this is like the age old conversation around abortion and birth control and all other stuff. Like, I don't care what you do. It's not my job to tell you what's the right thing and the only way to do this. It's my job to have a conversation, to get to know you, and then help you and help guide you based on what new of information becomes available. Even if it's in the middle of your labor, if you're feeling like, I don't feel safe, something doesn't feel safe, we got to go, then let's go. Like,
Is
let's go
it
to the
somebody's
hospital.
business if I chose to have a C-section in my home? What if I was like, you know what, Dr. Riley, I think I want to try and do this. I mean, like, say I'm having another baby. And I was like, I'm going to try and do this in my home, because I think that would be a cool thing. I've got this beautiful land here. The options are limitless here. So I'll try and do this here. But it may lead to a C-section. I just
Right.
don't want to go to a hospital. What if I just call you, book you a flight, come on over with your bag, but bring your 10 blade? Is it somebody's business at that point?
Um, well, again, I think you're asking the wrong question. If somebody were to ask me that, I would say, okay, well, tell me why you want to do that, you know? And they would say, well, uh, I, took an oath with the devil that if I ever had a hospital-based birth, he could have my soul. Okay, like, okay, that's a pretty important thing for me to know. That's a big pressure for you to not go to the hospital. But the question about like where to have a C-section, I mean, that's a bit of a strange question because there's so much that like if you wanted to have it in your home and you were going to build me an operating room, like yeah, let's do it. Like we could
I would
also
do an operate because I don't want to do this
yeah,
and
yeah,
be strapped down and have
sure.
a sheet in front of me and have everything freaking sterilized
Right.
and
Right.
white and freezing cold.
Sure.
You know,
So
like
here's how I do a C-section. I ask you for the first thing is like what music do you want to play? And if you say Kenny G, say, like, do you want the lights dim a little bit? Yeah, that'd be really sexy, Dr. Riley. Let's make it nice and sexy in here. And do you want Alex to have to wear his shirt? He looks probably great without a shirt. No, I don't want him to wear a shirt. Okay, like Alex, shirt off, bro. She's in control. We got our Kenny G
never got a
playing.
shirt on.
I don't think I own, this is my one shirt I own too. So he and I would get along well. So I mean, I'm being silly here, but what I'm illustrating is that there's a lot of different things we can do in a C-section in an operating room. And you just told me exactly what I needed to know. Like, okay, so you're afraid that you're going to be strapped down. You're going to be afraid you're not being heard. You're
Yeah.
going to be afraid that you can feel pain or that you're not going to get to have your baby on your breast right away, or that the baby's not going to get seated, or list any of those things that you've already told me in your stories. And what I would come back to you and say, like, okay, I understand you want to have it at home. I think it's going to be really hard to do that. In fact, I don't think I'm the right guy because I wouldn't feel safe not having some extra support staff there. But now that you've told me those things are important, what if I could guarantee you a 20-minute C-section? I'm not guaranteed, but what if I could say, hey, here's my plan. It's going to take us 20 minutes. The baby's going to be on your breast and breastfeeding, or on Alex's chest while we're suturing you up, whatever, right? He's going to be topless anyways. We're going to do all those things. We're going to be playing your favorite music. We're going to have the baby seated afterwards. We're not going to do any of the shots. Baby's not going to get a bath until you want to take them home and bathe them. I mean, you could go home the next day if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter to me. If those are the important things, what if we could set it up like that? Then you would have to come back to me and say, that doesn't sound so bad. Or, you know what? Fuck you. I still want to have it at home. And then we would have to go back to the drawing board. But do you see my point? Is that
Yeah.
everything here is it's a conversation. It's not my business to tell you you're a dum-dum for wanting to do certain thing. It's my job in my business to ask why, so that I can give you my expert recommendation. And honestly, if you wanted to have it in your living room, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a bad idea. I don't think I'll have the right lighting. I can't say that if my suture breaks, we're going to have enough sutures, to close your fascia up so that you don't have a hernia later. I can't say that we're going to be as sterile as I would like it to be. So you might be at increased risk for infection. If you're like, fuck all that stuff, I still want to do it. Then we go back to the drawing board. It's a conversation.
Too much cat.
What's that?
Too much cat hair flowing around.
Too much cat hair. Cat hair doesn't delays wound healing. I think I read a study about that.
Although the lighting is pretty good.
You do have a lot of natural light. That's a beautiful home you have. Yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah. But no, yeah, it was hypothetical.
Yeah, yeah. But that's how I would engage. I mean, that's a good question. And
yeah,
you've had a C-section, so the risks of VBAC, people usually are like, well, you shouldn't have a trial of labor after C-section, a TOLAC.
Yeah, because my uterus will blow up.
Your uterus is going to blow up, and your husband's wiener is going to fall off, right? So we don't want those things.
Children again.
Yeah. So hey, why don't we get you in the hospital? That's what I mean by sort of coercive language we use in childbirth, and that's what I'm really like off on a mission to change. Is all we have to do, guys, is change the way we talk about it. It's a less than 1% chance risk that your uterus ruptures. That leaves greater than a 99% chance that you're going to be fine. Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Because I've actually, when I was told that, I developed a fear.
Right. And that's the language. That's what I'm saying.
Very, like,
subtle.
What do you call it? Like the empathy of like when someone says something, like I feel it somatically in me. Like if I see violence on TV, I can feel it
You can feel
happening in
it.
my body.
Right.
So now if I think about uh, contractions in my uterus, it's almost like that LHPA, sort of that whole loop. Now it is programmed in that loop. If I
That's
can
right.
call contractions, I remember with my second and third, when I was having really strong contractions, there was that fear that the scar on my uterus was going to and my
Right.
baby would die,
Right. Yep.
because I could imagine it.
So we are right. So doctors and many midwives don't think that they're doing harm by counseling in that way, by saying, well, I'm afraid that, I recommend having a repeat C-section because there's a risk of your uterus rupturing. Well, what's the risk? Uh, it's 0.6%. Then you might be like, well, 0.6%. I probably have a better chance of dying on my car ride home than that. Now, that's not to say that those things don't happen. I've had some atrocious things happen in trial of labor after C-section, but that's over a long period of time. Attending, I don't know, maybe I've had 200 Tolacs in my life. I don't know what it is, but I've seen maybe one, and it didn't even rupture in the front; it ruptured in the back. Explain that, So it happens sufficiently enough that it's something that we should be thoughtful about. But is it something that should necessitate a second C-section? Because that sets you up for a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. And I think one really important thing that we don't talk about is this healthy mom, healthy baby thing around the conversation of C-section. What we're saying there is, hey, as long as you don't lose a ton of blood, as long as you and the baby don't die, and as long as you don't end up with some sort of, pulmonary embolism or sepsis or something like that, everything's good. Well, what we fail to consider are the metrics of like mother baby bonding afterwards, or like you said, the GI, the sort of GI seeding, right, by coming through the vaginal canal. Um, Not to mention like the child's development later, and the trust that has developed in the moment one of life by being held by their mom. How about lactation concerns or latching concerns, or just the long-term recovery after a C-section? And then that doesn't even take into account, like, after you've had one or two or three C-sections, the surgery to do a C-section is a lot harder. There's all the scar tissue inside the abdomen. There's neighbors.
Lumbopelvic motor control is
Right, right,
so
right,
hard if you are not
right,
very intentional and mindful
right,
about regaining that and
right.
reconnecting that neural loop
Mm, mm-hmm.
between your muscles and the soft tissue and
Yeah,
organs, and
right,
like,
right.
if you're not mindful and very intentional and know what you're doing, or working with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I've had a lot of clients come who came from physical therapy that really fucked them up,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And it just, the with I've seen with C-section, because a lot of times with pregnancy and vaginal, like even with vaginal birth and vaginal delivery, you're going to have, a little bit of diastasis. You're going to have, I mean, that's trauma. It is trauma to the body in itself. But then you add cutting a woman's torso in half
Mm-hmm.
on top of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're basically taking a woman's torso and just going boop and in
Yeah.
half,
Right. Right.
because the muscles split apart and stretch during pregnancy, and then you just go
Yeah.
and cut off that neurological feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just that takes it's really difficult
Yeah.
to get that back.
Yeah. And I mean, and these are doctors aren't really all that great at taking care of themselves. I feel like I am a bit of an exception there. I really, really take care of my health first and foremost, and then my patients come. If I'm not taking care of myself, I can't do a good job of caring for you. And it's not a surprise that the people who are not caring for themselves don't appreciate the sort of nuance of what it means to recover from this major surgery. It's just become so commonplace in some parts of our country
Yeah.
that that these other metrics are just, they're being missed. They're just being missed. Like we just don't even think it's important. You don't know what you don't know. So these conversations are really important, Sarah. And I appreciate you engaging in this in that way. And I know that some of this has been some vulnerable space for you. Um, and so I just appreciate you going there with me. I think that's what's lacking, is this back and forth. This is a consultation with me right now. This is what it would look like, which is,
Really?
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's amazing. And well, speaking of which, um, I know so many women that would benefit to work. And, before I even say that, I don't want you to get like 50 calls tomorrow or emails. I mean, I know some who are fangirling on you at this point right now. He's married, um, but
I'm married. I love her. I love her to death.
happily married,
You don't
not
stand a chance, other women.
not single. So, but I do have, so many just even in mind that would benefit
Yeah.
greatly
Hmm.
from working with you. I
Yeah.
mean, especially one very important one right now, that I want, like right now, for you
Yeah.
to start
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
Well, before I say that, um, do you have availability now and within the space to work with women who are looking to, um, get that extra care remotely, in those terms, like, and if they need prescriptions, are you able to do that? Working with them just to, if they're pregnant or if they're recovering from birth, and just wanting to get their health back on track, um, and just needing that patient relationship with somebody that can listen to them and care for them in that capacity. Do you have that, um, availability for if I were to open the doors for someone?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
I,
so,
I, I do. I do. Yeah.
oh, you do. Okay,
I
all
do.
right.
Yeah. Come one, come all, because really what
Okay.
I'm doing is I don't really compartmentalize what I do with my, like the challenges of daily living. There's a big part of my practice that is actually, it's a deeply important part of who I am. It's sort of like when you have a specific skill set, and mine is really the power of conversation around risks, benefits, alternatives. And I happen to be very, very good with the lifestyle medicine aspect and the functional medicine aspect of many women's
Yeah.
health problems, right? So it's that kind of perfect combination of things. And for me to provide that to people is so deeply important to me. Like who gets to actually do work that they're so super proud of, right? I mean, it really, really is a pleasure for me to even meet people like you, Sarah. And I know we don't need to talk about, what's going on with your family, but even just hearing about some of the things you've been going through with in your own personal life, um, it's deeply, deeply impactful to me to be able to help people. I mean, I've gone through my whole life training to do this, and I actually get to make people feel better, like really, really make them feel better.
Yeah.
So it's a part of my just daily flow is working with people like this. And I do work on a gifting platform, so people give whatever they feel, um, how in whatever way that they appreciate what I'm doing. It's a bit of a new thing for me, because I find that when I've taken that transactional nature out, it really opens the space for some real healing. And so people have gifted me all kinds of things, from money to crystals to baskets to whatever. And so yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an open space there. I'm working through this new model myself. And I give whatever time I can. And if somebody really, really needs my help, then I find a way to help them. So
That's amazing. That's beautiful. And most of my students, and many of my clients do know about my mom. I've had to be transparent about that
mhm.
because I've had to shift so many
Yeah.
things. They do
Yeah.
know. And so, yes, I mean, you've been very helpful in terms of providing so much one space and time, but also helping to guide me a little bit more
Yeah.
in that process and offering me so much of additional information that has helped to empower me more in terms of prepping me for
Yeah.
this. Now I'm
Yeah.
going back to the hospital. I know what questions to ask now. So you've been very, very helpful along this journey. So I just want to
Yeah.
thank you once again for that. And I'm so, so, so grateful. And I again, like I said, I've got so many in mind, but I would also like to, put your information out. If somebody wanted to email you or reach out to you, how can they do that? I shared your website across all.
Yeah. So Bill, I'm not on social media. I don't really do that. That takes actually time away. Promoting myself in some way takes
Oh,
time away from the work.
yeah,
So I don't really do much in the terms of promoting, but anybody like you who knows somebody that could utilize my help,
yeah,
belovedholistics.com is the website. And you can give people my phone number. It doesn't really matter to me. I really just like meeting people in this space. And interestingly, I'm learning so much from the process myself.
mhm,
It's just fun to be given problems that the medical system hasn't been able to figure out.
yeah,
That's what I signed up for, like give me your best shot. And if I can't find the answer, I'll find somebody that can,
right.
that can give you some help. But yeah, I'd love, the maternity space is really, really something I'm super passionate about. And I'm happy to help out really in whatever way I can.
Yeah. Well, when you get started on that birthing retreat center, let me know. I would like to help support that in any way that I can.
I will keep you in mind. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's funny. People are moving to Kentucky and they're coming out of the woodwork and they're like, "Hey,
I'm hearing this.
yeah, it's strange."
I'm
And I
hearing that
don't know if
Kentucky is a hot spot.
it's hot. It's hot right now. I think it's the soil that everybody wants to come out here and like live more naturally and live on,
Yeah.
like own some land and like you can
My
get a,
brother wants to go to Kentucky.
yeah, yeah.
I was
Hook
like,
hook us up.
when? Since when do you want to go to
Yeah,
Kentucky? How
yeah.
interesting. But yeah,
It's hot right now. It's hot right now. And I mean, I'm not saying like it's not like the LA crowd is moving out here. It's people that really want to actually disconnect
I can.
from the mess that is like living in big cities, which I love big cities. You're in Austin. Austin's an awesome town. Don't get me wrong. Um it's more like, hey, if we want to do something that's a little different, let's try to see what nature has to teach us. And I think Kentucky is a good way to, has
Yeah.
been drawing people for that reason. But yeah, people, midwives, all kinds of people are coming out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, I heard about the work you're doing. Can we collaborate?" And it's like, man, I'm like amassing this team of people who's going to really be able to put something special together. And in the meantime, I just get to dabble and get to meet interesting men and women along the way who have been teaching me as much as I've been teaching them. So it's actually been a real pleasure.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And yeah, so in whatever way I can help to support or connect you with people or um, funding, gathering funding or others that just can contribute in whatever way. I
Yeah.
think this is just a very cool thing. And
Yeah.
I would love to support you in however way I can.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Sarah. It's been really, really nice to get to know you. And I feel bad that we didn't even really get into like fertility stuff. We didn't get into endometriosis. If you ever want to talk again, we can dive into some of these topics a little more
Let's.
deeply.
I know because I do
Um,
have a lot of clients with endometriosis
that's
and
a big one. It's a really big one.
a couple of
I
the
have a
guys
lot to say.
want to know about endometriosis.
Yeah.
That is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
it might be one of those things where we can, maybe we do like a whole episode on that, because actually fertility is kind of tied into that as well. There's
it
some
is.
pretty big implications. So
Yeah.
So I guess like a one-liner for anybody who was hoping to hear, this would be like your little aperitif, is that there's definitely some sort of inflammatory component to this that isn't being fully appreciated. Of course, NSAIDs like ibuprofen are like one of the mainstays of therapy, but then apart from that, it's suppressing that ovarian action. And that's not what I'd love to do. I'd love to not just shut down your ovaries and sort of put you into like a funky state of pseudo, it's not really menopause because you're getting the hormones, but it's
Mhm.
like, there's an important reason to have all these endocrine systems working. So instead of just squelching them, let's try to get to the bottom of it. And I have been finding that there's some benefit through some breath work techniques and dietary changes and movement. And it's a process, but it's not even necessarily that you have endometriosis. There's could be bowel issues. There could be musculoskeletal issues and all this other stuff. So
Mhm.
we can totally talk more about that. I It's
Yeah.
something I'm becoming a little bit more interested in myself because there's a lot of people coming to me for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the metaphysical behind that too.
Absolutely. I didn't even mention a lot of that. I mean, there's a lot going on there with
Yeah.
endometriosis. So
All right. Yeah, that would be a good one.
Yeah.
Maybe we could follow up in a few weeks or something.
Sure.
So I will definitely, I'll let you know when I get this upload. I'll send you the private link, and I have some, so people can just contact you from belovedholistics.com. Correct?
Beloved Holistics. Yeah. Yeah. I can text you the link if you'd like.
Yeah, I love your website. So
Yeah.
simple. Here's
It's
some
straight to the point. There's
here's
also great resources on the website. Yeah.
basically, here's how you don't need me, but if you need me, here. That's what it is.
That's what I'm going to tell you, because I can't, I mean, I can't tell you how to, I can't eat well for you. I can't move
Yeah,
sometimes for you. So you still have to do that work. And then if,
yeah.
yeah. So
It just it's so telling of who you are. You're just so
yeah,
giving. Here's how to not.
very,
Here's all the stuff you need. But if you have questions, here's how you get in touch with me.
yeah. I mean, there's plenty of good
Great
resources.
website.
Even like the Czech Institute. If you go and take HLC1, like you're gonna pretty much know everything you need to know. It's. I've got these other tools here that from a medical doctor that does a
Yeah,
lot, has done a lot of surgery, that can maybe accommodate you in other ways. But gosh, it's unfortunately not rocket science, but it's extremely hard to maybe get into some new
yeah,
behavior patterns. So
yeah.
I know we work on that too. So
All right. Well, it has, it. Wow, it's already 1 o'clock here.
yeah,
Thank you so much for your time. I mean, this has been amazing. This has been awesome.
it's
Thank
been
you.
a real pleasure, Sarah. I
Very,
had no
very.
idea how that was going to go.
Yeah. I will talk to you soon. Whenever I do have some updates for you for my mom. Thank you again for all
That
of that.
sounds great. That's
So
my pleasure to be a part of that process with you too. The hospice and palliative care side of what I do actually has made me who I am as a women's healthcare provider. Really, is that sitting and holding space
yeah.
in the essence of adversity, and that's it's part of being human, and it's a pleasure to be a part of that journey with you.
You're pretty rad. I'm telling you, you're pretty rad. So thank you again. I'll talk to you very, very soon.
All right, Sarah. Take care. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.